confessions right at the head of things tonight. I am suffering a wee bit. I am a bit congested, more than a wee bit congested. I thought that I would get better, but it's actually got a wee bit worse as the week's gone on. But I feel fine, and I can still nose whiskey and taste whiskey. Perhaps not optimal, but I can still nose and taste it. And so there's no excuse. The vPub goes on. And tonight, we're gonna head out and explore some of whiskey's islands. I'm looking forward to it, and I'll see you in a second. Hello, whiskey folk. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thursday night. Welcome to the vPub. Hope you're all doing very, very well. Hope you're comfortable, and I hope you're feeling in better shape than I am. Honestly, I'm not feeling particularly bad. I'm not feeling poorly or anything, but I'm a bit blocked up. Perhaps you can hear it in my voice. I hope that's okay. Hope you can still hear me clearly. I sound a wee bit different, but I think it's because I'm inside my own head. Hopefully, I don't sound so different to all of you. And hopefully I'm not sitting here kind of absent-mindedly sniffling, coughing, and such. I've got my hankies ready. We're in good shape. And I've got the drams ready, and hopefully the whiskey, as always, will get us through. Aye, yes, I hope you're in better shape than me. Obviously, that means that I'm going to be uncorking whiskies with you tonight, and I'll caveat this a wee bit later as well. And while I always caveat it to say that it's not a review and uncorking is a neck pour, it's first impressions only, and things like that, I have to kind of double down on that tonight. I have to remind everyone that not only is it uncorking and kind of first impressions, but it's me feeling a wee bit congested and things. But I've been enjoying this dram tonight. I can certainly enjoy it and taste it and things. I just won't be doing any particularly insightful or analytical whiskey tasting or nosing notes, let's say. However, we will be going to explore some of the kind of mystical, magical spots of Scotch whisky production. Because let's be honest, you can come to Scotland and you can visit some distilleries and you can be swept up in the magic of it all, some more than others, absolutely, depending on whether it's your first or your 101st. You're gonna have a good time. But there's a difference when you cross water. There's a difference when you leave the mainland and you visit a spot that takes greater effort to get to. There's a couple of islands like Islay, like Orkney's obviously, that you can fly to, but often you find yourself on a boat and you're crossing the sea, you're crossing water, and it adds a wee bit of, is it just me? I mean, I don't think so. I think it's a little bit of romanticism, a little bit of adventure. Certainly, it's a lot of remoteness. As soon as you've crossed water, you do feel that distance. Anyway, I won't be able to explore all the islands tonight. I think it would take more than one vPub to do that justice. So I've decided to break it down into chunks. And tonight, vPub Island Whiskey Part 1 is going to be focusing on the Orkneys, right up north. But we're going to also take a wee visit right out west to Harris. And we'll also visit Raasay tonight as well. So 3 islands, 4 whiskies will be uncorked, 4 distilleries will be covered. I hope you're looking forward to that. I hope you're comfortable, and I hope it's something that you might be interested in. Anyway, before we get into all of that, and before we announce what's happening in the whiskey sphere tomorrow night, Friday night, it's a big weekend this weekend, and I'll share that with you, what that is tomorrow night as well. All of you can participate, regardless of where you are on the planet, and I've got somebody dropping in a wee minute to tell us all about it. But before we get to it all, I'll do what I always do. I'll welcome you all here, and I'll jump into the lounge and welcome some of the beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. Cheers, everyone. Sláinte. quite literally tonight, to your health. How we doing? How we doing? I'll be looking for the orange as I always do. So if you're trying to get my attention, just type Aquaviti or at Aquaviti. And I should see you. David Hongs bought me a wee dram straight away, right at the off. David, you never say very, very much, but you're always generous. Thank you very much for your generous dram, my friend. Thank you for dropping in and sharing some of the whiskey fun quite early on. Hope you're doing well, buddy, and it's nice to welcome you in the vPub. George Ellis here saying, sorry you're poorly, Roy. I prescribe a dram of Highland whiskey to set you right. Right on cue, George. Thank you very much, buddy. I think George is one of our Arizona crowd, so it's probably middle of the day for him, but it's a pleasure to welcome you, buddy. Julian Rickman is here. Good to see you, Julian. Evening, Roy and Barflies. Look forward to recognising our wonderful islands and their wares. We're going to be covering 3 islands tonight over 4 distilleries, Julian. So I'll share with you what the bottles are in a second. Sean Cosser is saying, evening, Aquavita. Evening, everyone. Good to see you, Sean, and thank you very much for your recent support, my friend. Good to welcome you in on a vPub Live. North Coast Drama. Good to see you, Tony. Saying, evening, folks. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you feel better soon, Aquavita. I'm feeling okay. I would just like to get rid of the blocked up sensation. Thanks, Tony. A grain of malt. Good to see you, buddy. James is saying, howdy, folks. Good evening, Roy. Good evening, James. I hope you're doing very well. Jimmy Jazz is saying, good evening, Aquavita. You're getting what I think all... you are getting what I got, I think. All good until it's not. Lost smell and taste after what started as a head cold. No, I really don't want that to happen. I've been testing and all negative tests so far for the C word, Jimmy. That would be a big shame indeed. I'm tasting this just fine right now. Please, to the whiskey gods, don't let that happen to me. Cesare the Fly Mooch is celebrating being a member for 19 months. Aquavita, Roy and everyone, great to be with you live today. Greetings from Polish. Slanj, Nazdrovie, I know how to say that, I think, but Slanj, maybe he's saying Slanj, Nazdrovie. My 3 whiskey is Buna, Dingle, and Alberta Premium Cask Strength. That's perfect company for tonight, Cesare. It's good to welcome you in, my friend. Warren Tanner is saying, evening, Roy. I'm very excited to uncork my single cask Kalila 12-year-old from Signatories Unchill Filtered Collection. Perfect pairing with tonight's theme. Feel better, Roy. Thank you, Warren, and I hope that that was shared at our blind tasting, and I think I brought back some dregs from that bottle, so it'd be nice to try it at some point in the future. I hope it's going down well, Warren. My pal from San Francisco, Aaron Rao, has bought a very generous dram. He's saying, Slantia, a wee dram and a box of tissues. Do you know what? I've gone through quite a few tissues only in the last day or so. I knew there was something going on, but I wasn't needing a lot in the way of tissues, Aaron. But that wee donation will go a long way to helping support there. Thank you very much, buddy. And it was wonderful to welcome you in Glasgow recently too. Lee Hosey, my pal from the East Coast, is celebrating being a member of Barflies for 48 months. Lee, thank you for your support. Aaron, Cesare, David Hong, and Lee, cheers so much. Islands, now you're talking, says Island Hopper Stuart, of course. When the boat leaves, yes, they're very special. There is a feeling. Fastcraft is saying the remoteness gets even greater when you realise that the ferries often need to schedule their trips around tides. That's right, and there's been lots of upsetting things. That sense that when you're on the island, your schedule might not go to plan, your return ferry might get cancelled, and you might have to stay a bit longer, and all of that wonderful stuff. Jimmy Legacy and Hi, Roy. You sound a bit more manly this evening. Good on you. A bit more manly. Thank you, Jimmy. Bruno Martins is saying, good evening, Roy. Glad to be here once again. And a Whiskey Weekend Dram Harrow saying, after a dinner with red wine and Imperial Stout at the bar, I'm ending at Arran with a lag Corrie Cravie, a great island. It is a great island indeed, Scotland in miniature, they say. And I'm very much enjoying my time exploring lag as well. Gordon Burniston is here. Good to see you, Gordon. He's saying, evening, Roy. Get well soon. Tuning in while hand washing 180 Glencairns after a brilliant first Glasgow South Side Whisky Club with Glasgow Distillery last night. Wish me luck. I'll wish you all the luck. Gordon, that's amazing. Glasgow South Side. So it's getting so big and so popular that we're actually starting to have regional whisky clubs as well. Gordon, if you need any help with your whisky club or whatever, if anybody at the vPub can help you, just shout, my friend. Good luck with it all. Drew from Arizona saying, great to see you, Roy. Drew, it's great to see you too, and I wish you health, buddy. I hope you're doing well. Dan is saying that's DVDW, just as it jumps, my friend. Sorry, Dan. Let's scroll back up and see if I can catch you. Oh. To chat amongst yourselves. Oh, Dan, I think you're so far up. Yeah, I need to catch up. Sorry, Dan. I hope you... No, here you are. Good topic. I've got a cane and grain single cask Jura, 10-year-old in the glass to kick off tonight. Bang on theme, Dan. And sorry about the chat jumping. It happens from time to time. I'm going to need to catch up a wee bit here. Stephen Toth, I haven't joined live in a while, but thank you for all your hard work the past month or so. I know you had a lot going on. I enjoyed all the stories and photos from the recent events, and I appreciate everything as always. Stephen, that's a wonderful message. Thank you very much, buddy. And a very, very generous dram to boot as well. Thank you, my friend. Thank you, Stephen. Maybe I'll get to welcome you here sometime soon. I know you're over in West Coast Canada or something, aren't you, Stephen? Cheers to you, buddy. Certainly a delicious wee dram. You might be quite surprised at what's in my glass tonight. Gav O'Connor is here, just tucked into a Macduff, a Master Malt Indy. Dingle up next for me too. So a couple of people enjoying Dingle in the chat tonight. Gav, you and Cesare can exchange notes a wee bit later. Tobias is saying, good evening, cheers to your health. Thank you, Tobias. Wonderful to welcome you in Glasgow recently, my friend. Nice to have you in the vPub. And Mike Molasses is saying, I hear using a netty pot with a single malt in it will clear the sinuses. Well, do you know what? I haven't tried this time around. I didn't feel like I needed it. Melt some honey in hot water, add some whiskey into it. You know, whether lots of people add vitamin C through lemon juice and things like that as well. And it's an enjoyable little thing that feels like you're having something medicinal. But for me, I tend to take it with paracetamol, and I would suspect that the whiskey and the paracetamol is doing all the heavy lifting in that little mix. We call it a hot toddy. David Larenko is saying, so you feel better. I love Diageo also in the same way. He's referencing the Dramface podcast, the video podcast that came out recently. It seems to be going down very, very well. We're gathering a lot of views and subscribers on a very, very sleepy YouTube channel that the Dramface podcast didn't do much on. It was an audio podcast. It was just incidentally shared on YouTube. But now that it's switched to video, there seems to be a lot of people attracted over there. It's nice to see it being received so well. We just need to work on the person who's responsible for editing it to get it out a bit faster. Would Australia be the world's biggest whiskey island along with the satellite Tasmania? Are we calling Australia an island? Yes, I suppose it is, but it's a hell of a big island, a continental island, right? But yes, and Chris Pollack is saying, nice poem. Again, referencing the Dramface podcast. Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. I was bullied into sharing that. Of course, you witnessed that, didn't you? All right. How are we doing for time? We're doing good. Jimmy Legg is saying, I'm brewing a dramaphone call for Gregor. We'll look forward to that. So just, I think everybody knows what Dramface is, but I know that there isn't necessarily a complete overlap between Dramface and the vPub and Aquavitae and things. This is the main focus for me. Aquavitae, it's my own thing. I get to do what I want. It's a total dictatorship. And it's fun. I love doing it, which is why even when I'm feeling a wee bit poorly, I still want to power through, because I realize there's a lot of people that look forward to their Thursday nights. So even if I'm just feeling a wee bit blocked up and things like that, that's not a good enough reason for there not to be a vPub. You don't turn up here for my analytical nosing and tasting notes and my scores, do you? We turn up to hang out and have a nice time together on a Thursday night, or if you're picking this up in the replay like so many of you do, thank you so much and welcome. But Dramface is a completely different space, a completely different entity, a completely different thing, and it's very sentient. It's built up of a bunch of people. So even although it doesn't feel quite as maybe sentient as the YouTube thing, because of the live chat scrolling and the comments underneath and the video and all of that stuff, Dramface feels much more static, but it is not. It's the written word, and it's not just tasting notes and scores. It's real life stories, anecdotes, behind the scenes knowledge, opinion, all of that kind of stuff wrapped around daily whiskey reviews. I hope you enjoy it. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that maybe don't enjoy reading so much, but it was wonderful over the Glasgow weekend, the amount of people that came up to me and said, Roy, I have not consumed a lot of written content on whiskey because they've come to know me, obviously, through the YouTube medium. But they started to read Dramface, and they got into the habit of looking forward to picking up a fresh perspective on whiskey every weekday morning over their coffee or cornflakes or whatever it may be. That's wonderful feedback to hear. But then with the podcast going from audio to video in the last, I don't know if it's going to permanently stay there. If it's successful and well received, then perhaps we might have made a bit of a rod for our own back and it has to stay video. But that's kind of, it's transformed things a little bit, and it's given it, I think, a new appeal to maybe new eyes. And hopefully there'll be a bit of cross-pollination there, so the people that pick it up on video will be curious about some of the things that's been referenced in the Dramface podcast and pick up the written word as well. It's doing very, very well. It's doing ridiculously well. If you type in, not everywhere, depending on where you are in the world, but most territories in the world now, if you type in whiskey reviews into Google, Dramface is usually coming up first. And if it isn't first, it's very, very close. We're not paying for anything there. There's no hacks to that. There's no cheating. There's no shortcuts. That is just daily grind of original content, original assets, original opinion. Everything is completely independent. I hope you're all enjoying it. Jimmy Legg is saying, I love the video format, even although I have to see Gregor's wall of hair. The man does have hair to make us all envious, Jimmy, doesn't he? Doesn't he? Wonderful to have Gregor in Glasgow for the festivities this last weekend as well. It was 2 weekends ago now, how time flies, right? But brilliant to have him. Matt Whiskey Games is saying, the latest Highland Park cast strength in the glass, such a delicious dram, reminded me of my Orkney trip this summer. Hold that thought on Highland Park, Matt. Nice to welcome you in, buddy. It's actually a Highland Park that's in the glass, but you might be surprised at which one. All right. I promised you that tomorrow night, this is a whiskey event weekend. And when Ralphie and I first came up with the concept of building the OSWIS, the Online Scotch Whisky Awards, part of the discussion was that S in the name. Do we put the S in there? Do we want it to be Scotch, Scotch, Scotch? And we threw it backwards and forwards, and eventually we said, absolutely we do. We don't want to be the global whiskey awards people, right? Our comfort zone is very much embedded in the Scotch community. Of course, we enjoy other whiskey styles. We enjoy, actually, other spirits, other brown spirits and white spirits and whatnot. But generally speaking, our comfort zone and our focus vision is Scotch. Our community, the community that we attract, Ralphie's channel and mine, for the most part, tends to be a Scotch-focused community too. It just makes sense. So therefore, what we wanted the OSWIS to be around was the Online Scotch Whisky Awards. It was going to be representative of the Scotch whisky community. But we didn't want to just focus on celebrating Scotch. We wanted to cater for the Scotch promiscuous whisky lover. So we had categories in there that would celebrate things outside of Scotch too. But part of the reckoning there is that we wanted to encourage other categories of whisky appreciation. You know, the big five. You could talk about, let's say, you talk about Japanese, you talk about Irish, you could talk about Canadian, and you can talk about American whisky too, whether that's bourbon or different styles of American whisky. And then the New World whiskies coming from Asia, coming from Australasia, Tasmania, wherever it may be. We wanted maybe that these communities, these growing concerns, these growing categories could potentially set up their own virtual, online, and hopefully independent initiatives too. Well, we're 4 years in now, and that's happened. The first one is already well underway, and wouldn't you know it, it's our neighbours just south of the border. What I'd like to do now is welcome in my pal, one of the most charismatic, humorous, funny, endearing folk to appear on the Whiskey YouTube scene, and that is my pal. Let's go with Jeff this evening. If he's doing good, give me a wee thumbs up, and we can welcome in Jeff. How you doing, fella? How you doing?
Yeah, I'm all good. Definitely bigged up the intro a little bit too much, but I'll do
No,
my
no,
best to
no,
live up to
no.
that.
I don't think so. I don't think so. The first thing I'm going to say to you is, before I ask you any in and out questions, is congratulations. Congratulations. This it's never going to be easy, but it needed somebody to say, do you know what? Do you know what? Let's do it. Somebody to crush through the imposter syndrome. Somebody to decide, why shouldn't it be me? In the absence of nobody else stepping up to do this thing, why not? Did you have any reticence? Did you have any concern about that?
Well, the bigger question would be, would you have any regrets about that? But
Well, that's coming.
being the first copycat, the first man out of the trenches is always a foolish one, they say. But I'm glad to. I'm not a knowledgeable person. I'm an enthusiast, not an expert. And I thought, well, I love all whiskey, and I'm kind of located, as you said, just south of you. A bit too far for my liking. I'd like to keep you more in hand's reach, but I'm down in the bottom of bumpkin land in England. Let's celebrate the local spirit. If Roy and Ralph, you can do it, those little guys, I can give it my best shot.
So you decided to just step up and give it a go.
Yeah, so it's not just me. I'm doing it with Vin. It was said during the Oscars live stream, someone said there should be an English one. And then someone then said, Jeff Whiskey, because I was in there loitering around in the chat. Jeff Whiskey, you should do this. And Jeff Whiskey and Vin, you should do this. I was like, well, you know what? I could put a little logo together, see how it looks. And then, yeah, it snowballed from there.
So that's all you need. Somebody that's passionate about branding. And once you've created a brand, you've created a thing and you need to go with it, right? You need to put some meat on the bone after that. So,
yeah, I just invested too many hours into making a little rose. And then I was too deep down it. Whiskey's a second part. We're not here for the whiskey. We're here for how things look, right?
And I'll just show people that's how pretty the little rose is in the background. They are looking very, very nice too. Listen, don't minimize these things. It's okay to have a bit of tongue-in-cheek humor and things like that. But I know the effort. I know the end. You guys would have had all the anguish and the to and fro and the should we do this? Should we do that? Should we do the next thing? It's good that you've got somebody running shotgun with you. You need a Vin. You need somebody else. You need a sounding board, and you need not just for the sanity of the decisions that you make and things like that, but also to take a wee bit of the weight, because there's a lot of, you're sticking your head above the parapet. So you are going to get a lot of kind of maybe potentially criticism and things. That's okay. Yes, I'm not going to say any more than that. It is okay. You get through it, but you need somebody, I think, from time to time to help you get through it.
I am super grateful of Vin. I've been scattergunning ideas since the get-go. I've just been throwing everything at him saying, what do you think of this? And I'll draw something. What do you think of this? So he's put a lot of putting up with me, WhatsApping him at 2 a.m, 10 o'clock at night saying, what do you think? So I'm very grateful. He's been my soundboard. He's got he knows the industry a lot more than I do. So it's been great I've been saying these really daft ideas, which in my head sound great. As soon as you say it, you're like, oh no, that was a bit daft. And then luckily I've got him to bounce off of. And yeah, I'm kind of like a big ball of energy, like a lost Labrador. And he's the collar and the lead that's kind of keeping me on the path.
Yeah. I wonder if you're describing the Roy and Ralphie relationship there a little bit too, and I'll leave it up to everyone who's the one on the leash and who's the one holding the leash. So take us through from the beginning. So I guess that was the nomination show, wasn't it? That came up, the Oswald nomination show that it came up. So you've decided to kind of start before the end of the Oswas, have a slight overlap, and then finish after the Oswas are done and dusted. Take us through the structure of it. How did it work?
So it's all very quick, possibly on reflection too quick, and it would have been maybe better to separate the kind of, I think I was just so excited for the Oswas. I kind of just bled into the passion of wanting to get in on that as well. So in reflection, probably we should have done it a lot more separate. I wanted to ensure that the Oswas kind of the voting ended before I promoted the English Whisky Awards.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of, for me, it feels like it's flown by. It's been really busy. Anyway, everything's been coming up. We're looking at doing things to the house as always. And it kind of gave me a pinpoint. So soon I'll be getting kicked out of this room. My little whiskey, the camera makes it look bigger than it is. And that, not just me, but the room itself. But I'll be getting kicked out of this room for some exciting event that's happening in the near future. Yes, and it's a case of, I've got this space now. I've got more time now. Let's just bang on while I can. And kind of, so yeah, the live show is tomorrow night. Voting closed last week, I want to say. 8:30.
How did that work? How did the voting work? What were you asking? I know that it's you can't really get anybody involved now because the voting has closed, but that's okay. The job is done this year, and we can enjoy the ceremony tomorrow night. And then for future events, initiatives, they'll know what's happening. So what were they offered? How could people who are interested in invested in English whiskey, how could they get involved? In what way?
So at first it was going to be a pretty carbon copy of the Oswald's, the similar categories. However, English whiskey is a much smaller niche. It's a tiny growing region. It's whiskies that a lot of people haven't tried. And if they have tried English whiskey, maybe it's one or two of the bigger distilleries. So we wanted to try to do a way where the people who've had more English whiskey can give as much of their knowledge and what they think is great. And then the people who've had less English whiskey can still get involved. So when I've been counting the votes, I foolishly made the decision it's an open box field. Anyone can add in any English whiskey. So there was a couple of people who added in Scotch. There was quite a rumbling for Welsh whiskey.
Yeah.
And that was something we discussed at the early stages. Do we include Welsh whiskey? But my view was I didn't want to overlook Welsh whiskies. I felt they've like Pendare and Aberfoyles. They're strong enough to have their own identity. So I didn't want them to be like a little overlooked tack on to the English whiskey awards, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a difficult message to convey then as well, isn't it? Even if those Welsh distilleries came forward and said, yeah, we'd like to be involved, there's always you've always got to remind people that, and Welsh. So I get that completely. It's difficult. That's very difficult, right?
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of like Welsh whiskey. I'm always chatting about Penderyn. And the initial run of Aberfoyles was spectacular. I am trying to not talk about English whiskey. I can now because the voting is closed, but it's hard, isn't it? You must really struggle in the run up to the Oswalds to not be too passionate about a bottle and feel like you're influencing people. Not that I have any influence.
When we're content creators, right? You've got weeks and weeks there where you just can't talk about a swathe of stuff, all these topics that are just removed from discussion because of the Oswalds. Absolutely, buddy, I get it. Well done you, though, for at least bringing the ethics discussion up.
Yes. Yeah, it's something I know. I imagine you get quite a lot of backlash. People, when it's easy to moan about something you're not involved in, and it's easy to make assumptions. So with the Oswalds, you are fully transparent, and we wanted to reflect that. And it was a case of so me and Vin haven't voted as much as I've wanted to. And I can't say anything about the winners. But as much as we wanted to get involved, we haven't. We've taken a step back. We've let it to everyone, do their thing. And we kind of boiled it down to 3 categories. And that is to focus on. So because English whiskey is smaller, I felt like if we had too many like things out there, it would be just an influx of data, which could, it could lead to an uninteresting amount of results, if that makes sense. It could dilute the punch of it. So we are just focusing on a best value English whiskey, best distillery, and best English whiskey. So best value is your bang for your buck, not the cheapest, but the one that, punches well above its price tag. Best distillery does what it says on the tin. The English whiskey distillery that kind of does the best tour, the best marketing, the best releases, the best engagement, sustainability, all that kind of good jazz.
Yep. Anyone's interpretation of how they see the best distillery. Yeah. Absolutely. Yep.
And then best English whiskey, just the specific bottle that is the best English whiskey in your eyes. And everyone can submit up to 3 choices in each category. Some people did all 3. Some people submitted 2. Some only 1. So it's kind of it was just a case to give this is the pilot, and it gives as much people a chance to throw as much love for as English whiskey as they can at one point.
So I think I get what you're. If you look at the spread of the Oswas and at the category vote spread, there's a letter E that the bar chart makes, and it's that best value, best distillery, best Scotch whisky. It's those three that are the most highest engagement. So you've done the right thing perfectly. Let me say to everyone out there that's looking at this now, thinking that there's going to be a huge element of popularity contest in there, the ones that have the biggest distribution, the ones that are people are most familiar with, things like that, are obviously going to bob to the top. That's too obvious, and if that's the criticism that you're going to have to deal with, that's easy. That's no problem. It's just very obvious. I predict that what could happen is the messaging that comes in the subtlety, the messaging that comes in the detail. I think that what you might end up with tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to this, and I'll definitely be tuning in, buddy, is that you might be able to give everyone out there who cares a brilliant cross-section snapshot of English whiskey in 2024. Are you going to talk about a people's choice type thing, or a?
So in theory, every category is people's choice. So because we haven't gone for the nomination stage, but yeah, it's less about, obviously we're going to focus on the winners, and we're including 3 runners up in every category. So the top 4 would be highlighted. So you've got your winner, and then you've got the 3 below it. And then after each one, we're then going to go through the top 10. And this should help give just a more diverse range of maybe, and we're going to try to provide context to each one. As you said, some brands invest a lot more in marketing. Some brands are a lot more international. So we're going to try to take that into context. And there has been lots of gems highlighted, which hopefully people will then look to engage with. And it's just, while we're here to celebrate and champion the English winners, we're here to also champion English whiskey as a whole, and just whiskey as a whole. Because as good as English whiskey gets, Scotch whiskey's got to make sure they continue to rise. As Japanese whiskey's got to make sure they continue to rise. As whiskey gets better in one region, hopefully it then leads every whiskey region to get better.
Well, I have to say that even over the course of the Glasgow Whisky Festival weekend, and all of the events that we put together, an English whiskey featured. On the Friday tasting, we had Wireworks. Tom Lindsay came up and hosted us there for a fantastic Wireworks White Peak whiskey that was reduced through a process called Petit-O, which is used in cognac, which was fantastic. On the Sunday at the blind tasting, we featured a Circumstance whiskey from Bristol, and we get this general vibe, this impression that English whiskey is getting chatter and attention, not because it exists, but because it's good. The scale of it is challenging right now, as you're dealing with. It's so small. All the distilleries are still so small, still at that point of being fairly unknown. But I suspect it might change in future, especially with initiatives such as what you're facing here, what you're bringing to us here. Let's share this, buddy, so that people know what we're dealing with. I've got the link pinned in the chat here. So, and if you're watching the live chat, and hopefully I've done my homework, and the link is here. But if you're struggling, just search Jeff Whiskey on YouTube. You'll find him easily. JEFF. It's upcoming. But the winner's show goes out tomorrow night. This is GMT, obviously UK time. We are on GMT right now. Now the clocks have changed. Tomorrow evening at 8:30. Vin's joining you to host it, right?
Yeah, and we've got the winners joining us hopefully as well.
Absolutely fantastic, superb. And you can find all of it happening over on, it is on your channel, of course it is, yes.
Yeah.
Over on the Jeff Whiskey channel from 8:30 tomorrow. I think there is noise. There's talk of a podcast, a Dramfeast podcast recording tomorrow, but I'm going to deliberately push it out in order for us to catch this. It's not an insignificant event, buddy. This is a big deal, and I know that it's taken you and Vin a lot of effort to put it together, and it deserves all of our support, because I know that it's every bit as earnest, honest, and independent as the Online Scotch Whisky Awards.
Oh, thanks.
It can be done. It can be done.
And I think the beauty of it is, if I can do this, anyone can do it. So we won't be in Oswa, but we will be an Engwa. We will be focused on Japanese, Australia, New Zealand. Like, hopefully I can be the test dummy in the car. If it goes terribly wrong, people can learn from my mistakes and then they can follow through. And if it somehow goes right and anyone wants any tips, ask Finn.
I love the humility, buddy. I love the self-deprecation. I really do. But I know you're going to do a decent job, a very, very good job. You've got a good guy as your backup there in Vin, and I can't wait to look forward to what you bring us tomorrow evening. And honestly, and I'm saying this as a Glaswegian and a Scotsman and somebody who loves Scotch whisky, I'm looking forward to what the English whisky scene brings to us in the future as well. Jeff, my friend, I look forward to tomorrow night. Good luck with it, big guy. Good luck with everything.
Cheers, buddy.
Cheers,
gonna need it.
You'll kill it, big guy. Thank you. Thanks for coming on and sharing it with us.
My pleasure. Cheers, man.
Cheers, man. So I look forward to hanging out with you all tomorrow night, if possible, 8:30 over on Jeff Whiskey's channel. I guarantee you that the work that the two of them have put in is going to be difficult for anybody to imagine. Obviously, I've got a wee team that's built up around me now with Rob and Chuck. So Ralphie and I have shared the workload a wee bit there. Nevertheless, it's still a lot of, and it's not just the man hours that goes into it, it's the kind of the weight of it all, the anxiety as well. Anyway, good luck to the English Whisky Awards for tomorrow night. Fantastic stuff. Let's bring it back to Scotland now. Let's bring it back to the island whiskies. How are we doing? We're doing all right. Keith Mackenzie's here. Spirit of Yorkshire has the hand of God as it's made in his country. God's country of Yorkshire, of course. Keith, you're not in Yorkshire, are you? I don't think you're in Yorkshire. You might be. I'm not sure. Alan Smith is saying, I think the winners might get a nice wee boost. Well, we hope so. It depends on the interaction. It just depends on the impact. But certainly, as I say, I think if somebody's looking for where do I go and this is a new scene, where do I start? I think these Iwas or Ingwas, did Pete say Ingwas? It's going to be something that people can use as a very hard anchor. And Lowlander is saying, I thought Aquavita has been talking to Max Headroom all this time. Oh dear. I hope there wasn't any kind of stutter or hesitation there. Was it a weak feed from my side or Jeff's side? I hope that's okay. I hope it's okay. I've got an empty glass now, but I can share with you that what was in the glass is the first of the island whiskies that we're going to be talking about tonight. We're going to first go way, way, way up north, way up beyond the mainland up into the Orkneys, where there are currently, interestingly, in the 2007 Malt Whisky Yearbook, which is the oldest one I currently own, I'd love to get the 2006, there are 2 Orkney distilleries. In the Malt Whisky Yearbook 2025, there are 4 Orkney distilleries. Island distilleries, not including Islay, it's a separate region. So we're looking at the island distilleries as part of the Highland region for the most part. Maybe Lag is a lowlander. But the island distilleries, if we pick up the 2007 book, we've got half a dozen, 6 distilleries in there. If we pick up the 2025, it's done more than double. There are 16 now. 10 more remote island distilleries over the course of the life of the Malt Whisky Yearbook. Quite incredible growth that we've seen there. But the first 2 distilleries that I'm going to focus on now, and as I said, we'll bring more of these to you in the future. I can't touch all of these distilleries in one vPub. Are legacy distilleries. These are distilleries that have been around for a long time. The first one is one of the original 9 operational 18th century distilleries, founded in 1798, is Highland Park. And this is what's been in the glass for me this evening. Highland Park 18. Now, I've had this on the shelf for a long time. This used to be a staple gift for me from my wife. When she was thinking about a whiskey to buy, she wanted to make a surprise or whatever. It was just Highland Park 18. She must have bought it for me probably at least 3 times over the years, probably in 3 different branding. bottlings as well. Maybe not 3, but this is the last one, and it was pre-pandemic, I think this was purchased. So I've had this for quite a wee while, I think. It's been on the shelf for a long time. But with so many other whiskies on the shelf, it's taken me quite a while to get through it. As I taste it tonight, it's every bit as vibrant. To me, it hasn't lost anything at all. However, we are always a wee bit disappointed that it's bottled at 43%, aren't we? It's better than 40, but it's still going to be chill filtered. Now, it's Highland Park, so it's natural colour. There's no colour in this product. Very grateful for that. But it's obviously chill filtered at 43%. I have always loved Highland Park over the years. It's a wee bit of a, I hesitate to use the phrase guilty pleasure. It's just a pleasure. It's a pleasure. But because it's kind of always kind of one of these aspirational brands, it's always trying to punch out of its niche, whatever niche it's in. It's never comfortable where it is. It's always trying to go someplace else, right? It's always trying to grow. It's always trying to get, it's always a bit contrived and a bit, you know the drill, you know the story. I think it's trying to follow its stablemate sometimes after a luxury positioning, perhaps. But there's no question that Highland Park as a malt is just one of the most perfectly balanced. If you were to do the flavour map of Scotch whisky, you know, delicate to rich or light to smoky, and put it right in the middle, you would just nudge it ever so slightly towards smoky and ever so slightly towards rich. But you would be keeping it fairly central. It is such a balanced, rounded, kind of perfect snapshot of Scotch whisky, Highland Park. It really is. It's always been a favourite of mine over the years. It's certainly my favourite of the Edrington portfolio by quite a margin. And that's got everything to do with the fact that despite its aspirations and its nonsense and its over-branding at times that it's been guilty of, it's still managed to have at least some product pretty grounded and available. And for a long time, that product has been the rock solid 12-year-old. And this is the one that we're going to focus on tonight. However, let's get it out of the way. The ones I would be more comfortable recommending is maybe if you can get this at a good price. This is a wee bit pricey for my money. They've changed away from this ceramic bottle. This is moved back to a clear glass bottle now in the branding. The 15-year-old is probably a wee bit more value for money, certainly than the 18, which is overpriced. But this is often the banger value here. This is the cask strength release. Now, I think this is batch 3 of cask strength release. It's 63.9%. Trying to think where it's... No, this is actually release number 2. Release 2, I think we're up to batch 3 now. And I know that the recommended retail is closer to £80 on this, which is too much. But you can regularly get this on offer. And I picked this up at £60, I think even a wee bit less than that. And at that price point, this is great value and easily the best value Highland Park. Retail, maybe less so. However, what we're going to do is we're going to take our 12-year-old and we're going to look at how things have shaped up, because they've gone and done this recently. It's hard to think of a brand that's rebranded more in the last 2 decades than Highland Park. If I think about when I first got into whiskey, the branding that I could go into the supermarket and buy, and by the way, the 18-year-old was literally on the shelf in the supermarket back then too. I think it was maybe 45 quid or something. Anyway, it was kind of round dumpy bottles. And then it switched to the more flask-shaped ones. And it stayed like that for maybe about a decade or so. And then I think in maybe 2017, it started to move into this very kind of quite heavily decorated, kind of more Viking style. But you maybe notice one of the problems with this is that at any distance at all, you cannot read this label. This is silver foil against a black background. Even the red, you know, the most vibrant color over distance, red is almost difficult to make out at any distance. And I always felt like this was clunky. Highland Park has always been quite a dark labeling. but they didn't move this forward in kind of readability, legibility, let's say. I think it was, and I never really loved this overly fussy bottle. It was the liquid that kept me invested in this rebrand. I never loved this. I preferred the previous branding, honestly, and I never got to or grew to love it. But what we've got here is much more vanilla, isn't it, on first approach? This looks very beige even, I think. And as we bring this out, we're going to be uncorking this tonight. This is reminiscent of a box of chocolates. We've got a brand in the UK called Dairy Box. And that's what it reminds me of. It's like a box of Dairy Box chocolates. However, when you touch the packaging here, the box is superfluous in my mind, whatever. I don't need a box, but they do. And their market potentially does. It's actually much nicer. It's a bit more substantial. It's a bit more textured. There's little flecks in here. There's metallics. There's nice colors. It's just a whole lot more clear, legible, and a bit more presentable, let's say. I think the typeface and things like that is a good mix of kind of modern and retro, vintage and contemporary. All of that is much better in the hand than it was in any images that I saw. Unfortunately, when it comes to presentation, as with all the 12-year-olds, 40% remains how it's presented. It just is what it is. Again, if we look at the bottle when it's in the hand, this is much, much better than I expected it to be. It's got a bit more presence here. It's much clearer. The liquid is much more forward. The bottle and the glass doesn't take anything away from the colors of the liquid. And when you look at this labeling with its kind of slightly textured paper, with the flecks through it, with the metallic gold and the gloss black embossed, this is a nicer thing. Holding this in the hand is a much prettier thing than perhaps the pictures betray. Let's get it open. We're not expecting anything brilliant here. We've got a 40% entry-level whiskey. It is what it is. Oh, there's a nice wee. So if I take the plastic cap off here, there's a nice little highlight on the cork. I'll need to, you can maybe just about see that. It looks gold in the camera. It is actually gold, but it's quite a dark gold. It's quite nice. Very similar to the old one. So I suspect that it's also maybe a locking cap. Let's see. Yep, you need to twist first to get it off. Yep, got a wee locking mechanism there. Wee twist lock. It's not like me to do that, is it? Here we go. That's better. So let's get this in the glass and see how we are with... I've just had the 18-year-old, so that's probably not fair. But given the fact that I'm pretty congested. Anyway, no glug. I bet you if I'd poured it that way, I would have got a glug, right? No glug. There we go. I have found Highland Park 12-year-old at 40%, honestly, to be very consistent in recent years. You can go back to 20 years ago, the dumpy bottles, the rounder bottles, and there's much more earthiness, much more depth, much more boldness, much more roundness. There's just more to it. But in recent years, in the last decade or so, things have got a little bit more light, a little bit more modern, a little bit about what stock they have available, I suspect. That said, it never, ever has let me down, the 12-year-old. It's very often one of these pours, if you're in a restaurant or a bar or whatever, and it's not a whiskey bar, you look behind, you maybe see a limited amount of whiskies available. But Highland Park 12 is almost always one of the ones that's there. I'm very grateful to still be able to smell despite the fact I'm congested. But like I say, it's not optimal. But you've got that lovely honey-rich. There would have been a time in my whiskey journey I would have picked up smoke on this, but not tonight. I suffer from peat blight at the best of times. It's not obviously smoky to me. If I was to sip it next to something that had no smoke in it and go backwards and forwards, probably I would get it. Feeling that maybe the empty glass would betray some smoke. But there is an aromatic side to it. There's a richness to things. Always get marmalade. People talk about heather, and I think it's almost the idea that because we know that they use Orcadian peat, or that they part use Orcadian peat, they use peat for a certain amount of hours, and then they switch to Coke after the peat. I don't know if they're using caffeine-free diet or classic Coke. Stop it, Roy. So they're getting some smoke into that malt before it's milled, and then they're bringing in from the mainland. They're bringing in unpeated malt, and then they mix it. So maybe they're getting 20, 30, 35 ppm malt in-house, mixing it with unpeated malt. So you could think that you're getting some heather because of that Orcadian peat that's used in here, and you're looking for heather, and that's just, you kind of knows this. But for me, it's always an orange thing, an orange zest thing, and it always makes me think of the orange peel that you would use in Christmas cakes and things. It's got a kind of marmalade nature to it. That's the best I can. So you start to talk less about heather and maybe more about orange blossom and stuff. For me, it's kind of waxy dried oranges. And there's a certain farm quality to Highland Park as well. And just go with it. And there is a kind of floral nature to things. Maybe a bit of rose. Gorse, let's go with that. Whatever gorse might smell like. But you're outdoors and it's kind of floral, that kind of thing. Anyway, Highland Park 12. This is just out in the new branding, so I've had to pay a wee bit more. I think it was £45, £48. That's going to be the high end of what you have to pay for this. But I put this to you. One sip of this. Remember the 2 vPubs I did earlier this year, talking about the top 10 bestsellers in whiskey? And we went through everything and then my edited list. The majority of those were 40% ABV whiskies. Put this in a lineup of 40% ABV whiskies, I guarantee you it will power through. There is enough here at 40% to carry it. Yes, it's heartbreaking that we don't get it. It's malt. It should be presented the way that malt wants to be presented. It doesn't want to be watered down. It doesn't like it. It hazes up, so that means you have to chill filter it. If you chill filter it, you lose flavor, you lose texture. We know this, so there is things missing here. But let's celebrate the fact that it's Highland Park and it is natural color. I wish they would put it on the label, but they don't, being Edrington. Interestingly, 25 years ago, they were colouring Highland Park 12, but that's long since been natural. This is very good whiskey for 40%. I have to say, it sounds like I'm saying this is good whiskey despite being 40%, but that is the case. I suspect that we'll be able to pick this up soon, much cheaper than the retail that it's out there just now in the new branding. And I think that for a 40% whiskey, if this is something that you're going to take along to somebody who's not a whiskey fan, not a whiskey enthusiast, who just likes having a dram and is looking for something that's quite soft and approachable, but a bit of interesting flavour in there too, I don't think you could go wrong. Yes, we would like it natural. All week brands are moving to a small circle in the middle of the flavour map, Aquaviti. I think you're right, Jimmy. I think there's a lot of truth in what you say there. It's almost like a gravitational pull to the mediocrity of homogenization in the centre of the map, right? Maybe to the lighter, sweeter end of the map sometimes too. Grain and Malt saying lol, and Gordon Fraser saying top 10 joke, I lolled. I should have kept it to myself. It just popped out. It just fell out when I was thinking about it. You know, Coke, obviously. The Coke joke. Says Whiskey Central Shayla, good to see you. Good to have you here. Thank you for laughing at the joke as well. Everyone is saying perhaps it was a fashionable time in whiskey, but when I was just getting into Scotch, the advice I often got was Highland Park. The 18 was the high mark of good and affordable. And I suspect, Chris, that back then it genuinely was something even more special than it is today. Ryan Sutherland is saying if it's traditional floor malted, I'd like to guess that the ppm will be in the 10 to 20 range. Maybe wrong, but that's what most traditional operations were doing back in the day, Lafroig being one. You could absolutely be correct, Ryan, and I'll doff my cap to your better knowledge, buddy. You're in the business and you're doing the thing. The first smells like coconut to me, says Sugar Kitty. I am muted tonight, big guy, so I need to look for the coconut a wee bit later, but it would make some sense. Celtic Drama is saying, I'm not drinking whilst we move house between Codder and Aviemore, and you're making me drool with your description of HP12. Good to have you in, Gary. I hope you're keeping well, and I hope the move goes well. Moving down to Aviemore. It's a bit further south, isn't it, bud? George P, just does it jump, George? Go back up. Evening to you in the Bathlice. George is saying, just back from an amazing Coquern tasting. Spoiler, next year's 8-year-old is going to be a banger. Spoiler, but no spoiler. Surprise, but no surprise, right, George? So I'm glad you enjoyed it. It sounds amazing. Greg in Paris is saying even the 10-year-old core range is amazing for what it is and the price, right? Aquavit is some nice complexity. Yeah, I mean, I would say that there are layers here, Greg. You're right. There is some complexity here, despite it being down at 40% ABV. I think what I'm most surprised about is the sense of a richness to it. It's a pretty well put together product, despite I'm not going to keep doing it. Tom's Drama is saying, I do like the new Highland Park branding, but 40%, it's not for me. And I think you're absolutely right, Tom. And I think we need to talk about this and say that Highland Park are trying to appeal to a crowd and an audience that is not us. It's not. There's very little in the range, maybe the cast strength and one or two others that are slightly higher ABV. We hope much more naturally presented, but even the higher ABV does not guarantee unchill filtered, non-chill filtered, unless it's written on the label. They are speaking to a different crowd, and they are also doing very similar things to Macallan, where they're trying to premiumize and they're trying to position their product as something a bit more luxury, a bit more premium or uber premium or ultra premium, all this nonsense. But I put it to you, if you looked at these two things, despite the general dimensions, shape and style of these two bottles sitting side by side, you tell me which one looks more classy. This is a step in the right direction from this humble, layman. I think this is a prettier thing. I think it looks classier. I think it's clearer. I like the smooth glass. I like the fact that they've kept this H that's been around for a couple of decades at least now. There is some continuity there. I like the flask shape. It looks like a bottle of Scotch whisky, and I think this is an improvement. And when you hold it in your hands, the more kind of vanilla, kind of dialing down of the over-branding is not as clumsy or as brutal as you might think. There's nice subtlety here, and it does feel quite nice. I was quite impressed. I'd even go as far to say that I was a wee bit impressed by the box too, but I'm not into excuse me, I'm not into boxes, as you know. If I do end up with a coughing fit tonight, I will probably just pull up a wee back in a minute thing. So if that happens, it's because I've had to go and blow my nose, have a coughing fit, do whatever I have to do, okay? So apologies. As I said at the outset, I'm a wee bit congested, but the vPub goes on. We continue. So there we have Highland Park rebranding. solidifying their 12, they're 15, they're 18, they're 21, you know, going from mass market affordable in a 12-year-old to much more exclusive, much more expensive, out of range. My wife will not be buying me an 18-year-old again. I won't be investing in the 18-year-old again, and certainly not touching the 21-year-old, and that's a shame, because it was only about 8 or 10 years ago we were able to engage with those things. It is what it is. That said, they've got us a 40% 12-year-old entry level here that might vie as being one of the best 40% products that you can buy. And I suspect the price is going to come down too. But what of the distilleries on the islands that are saying, do you know what? People love our whiskey. People love it. And we're perhaps not doing them a service. We're perhaps not doing our malt a service. We are maybe even doing our malt a disservice. This is a conversation that's happening in my head. I don't know that it's actually happening out there in the big, wide world. Certainly not in the boardrooms, in the marketing meetings, in the business development meetings, in the product development meetings of whiskey companies. But surely it's happening now and again. Let's get a clean Glencairn. A few weeks ago, I brought to you Highland Park's neighbour and its rebranding here with the 16-year-old. Now, the level always betrays how much you're enjoying a whiskey, but I need to caveat this. This is Rolf Isaacson's bottle. And Rolfie brought this to me already quite low. And Phil, he'd been enjoying it himself, and he gave me the balance of it. Thank you so much, Rolfie. But I think, unfortunately, for this being the sweet spot of malt whiskey, 16 years old, this is too flat, too smooth, there's no vibrance here. There's not much when it comes to betraying the age here, despite 48% ABV. And I'd like to correct what I said on a previous vPub. I can tell you that this is non-chill filtered. I suspect that it's coloured, but let's leave it at that for now. I was really excited about this, and I feel like, despite the fact that it's a reasonable price at 16 years old, in the 80 to 90 pounds ballpark, I believe, it might end up being more expensive than that when it becomes more widely available. I was a wee bit let down by the 16-year-old. But I love the malt that comes from Scapa, despite the fact that it's intermittent, despite the amount of years that it's spent closed. We've been catching up for the last near on 20 years, 18 to 20 years now. Scapa has been clicking along at a fair old rate, building up stocks, catching up. It's not been shuttered very much in the last couple of decades. So now we have, alongside that 16-year-old release, we have this release. This is their 10-year-old from Orkney. And look what it says on the side of the box here. And apparently the box that the 16-year-old came in said the same thing. I hope it focuses. Non-chill filtered down the bottom in the dark area there. Doesn't say on the bottle, which is why I missed it on the 16-year-old. But let's have a wee look at this 10-year-old. Now, I want to point out that the price of this 10-year-old was the same as the price of Highland Park's 12-year-old. So you might think that Highland Park is giving you a wee bit better value there, 2 years more age. Well, let me correct you very, very quickly. This, although you won't see it, 10-year-old is also at 48% ABV. And as I've shown you on the box, it's unchill filtered. However, I do suspect that this is coloured, which would be a shame. I've held this up against some sherry cask whiskey of the same age and things like that, and it's getting very, very close, and occasionally sometimes a wee bit darker. This is quite dark. Now, it could be that it's using some sherry, quite a lot of sherry in the mix, and using a bit of really quite active first fill bourbon, maybe a bit of virgin oak. We don't know. There's not a lot of information in that direction, but without a natural colour statement on the bottle, we're left to guess, aren't we? But what's worse than that is that we're left to think, well, can we really appreciate the colour of this if we don't know if it's natural? If somebody's just dropping in a big lump of caramel when it gets to the bottling plant, that kind of robs us of the appreciation element of colour in malt whisky, doesn't it? Anyway, let's get this 10-year-old opened as we go across to the Highland Park's neighbour on Orkney. See if we get a glug. The quietest of glugs. This is an uncorking. It's not a review, but I am curious, despite the fact I felt a wee bit let down from the 16-year-old. This is in a kind of affordable spectrum. This is a decent effort from Scapa here. This is them bringing something out at a sub £50 price point. A good ABV for Pernod Ricard Chivas Brothers, 48%. This is 10-year age statement. This couldn't have existed 10 years ago. They did not have the stock. This is a product that you can enjoy today because of the renaissance of Scapa, because of the investment originally by the original owners Allied, and then when Chivas took over, they continued the investment and they've been building it up since. Unfortunately, Skiren and Glansa were very poor in my opinion. Skiren was unpeated, Glansa was peated. 40% ABV whiskies that did not represent Scapa malt. Oh, wow. I'm going to just nose this against this Highland Park. Okay, that's incredible and very encouraging. So I suspect anybody that's going to pour one of these 10-year-old Scapas, the first thing they're going to get is a really warm, welcoming blast of fruit. Now, I am a wee bit congested, as you know, as I've been talking about tonight. So I suspect that with a clear nose, palate, everything, I mean, for that to cut through like it is, I don't know if I'd suggest tropical, but I would say bright end of orchard. Sweet conference pear, green, sweet, golden, delicious apple, wee bit of pineapple even, so we're edging towards that end. This is very, very sweet and fruity on the nose. It makes me think, do island whiskies have a particular style? And I'm going to suggest to you, I'm going to posit to you that yes, they do. But it's in our head. We have, as whiskey enthusiasts, I think, a general expectation of what a classic island whiskey might taste like. Something a little bit more kind of waxy, oily, salty, coastal, fruity, with a light to medium amount of peat smoke and savoury element in there too. Something a little bit challenging, something with layers of complexity. Something very Scotchy, let's say. For me, in my head, that's my take on island style and island whiskies. But for me, this is not that. This is a fruity style of whiskey, pleasantly fruity. There's a sweetness on the nose. I'm dying to take a wee sip of this. This is much more pleasing, much more engaging than any time I've nosed the 16-year-old. Cheers, everyone. Okay, geez a minute. It's not difficult. I've come from the 12-year-old Highland Park. Lovely. We talked about all the reasons it makes that lovely despite being 40%. Then you go into something like this, very similar age, very, very similar in terms of location. And this is alive. This is a sentient, breathing, vibrant thing. That fruit is there. But on the palate, helped by that ABV, you get this lovely spice, you get the ginger, you get this sense that there's not, the Highland Park is round and soft and kind of got a globule of whiskey, whereas this is jagged and communicative and engaging. There's shape and there's vibrance to this as it arrives. Ginger spice, that fruit is much more defined. There's darker fruits in there as well. Scapa. My goodness. We've got an affordable Scapa that's honest and alive and vibrant and tastes good and affordable. This isn't available everywhere yet in the UK. Some outlets have got it. Not everyone has it yet. This is coming. This is a large outturn thing. It might be coloured. That would be a shame. Let's go back to Highland Park. That's interesting. The Highland Park is quite soft, round and but it does highlight a bit of kind of moodiness to Highland Park. A bit of a kind of that's quite nice. Maltche, autumnal element to it, whereas this is much more spring and summer. Ginger, lovely ginger, but fresh ginger, like, you know, the vibrance, that freshness that you get from ginger. And I suspect that that's the malt itself, but also that ABV helping to communicate those kind of more grippy, vibrant things. That's a pleasure. This is a 10-year-old whiskey. Is it Springbank? I'm not sure. I don't know if we're there. I don't think we've got that level of complexity, that level of depth. But we are better by a factor of a considerable amount better than we've ever been with Scapa before. That's much better than I could have reasonably hoped and expected. You can tell, look, I've already sipped it down to the same level as the Highland Park. I'm just that kind of Moorish nature of it. My goodness. Wonderful. Harrow is saying, is it time for Scapa to shine as the Orkney whiskey? There's a lot of people, for as long as I've been drinking whiskey, Harrow, there has been people telling me how wonderful Scapa is. Now, back when I started to drink whiskey, there was a G&M distillery label, Scapa, that you could pick up that was sold by Vintage. There have been one or two along the way. Scapa 16, one of the earliest bottles I ever had when I was into whiskey was a Scapa 14, which was a kind of beige one, the lighthouse one. Scapa 16 came along at 40%, and people declared that the best 40% whiskey you could buy. All of these things, Scapa. I have never really had any whiskey that made it obvious to me why people loved Scapa so much. Because of the patchiness of when it was open and closed, it was difficult to get a hold of anything. Certainly, there wasn't a lot of Scapa. I don't recall ever seeing much Scapa from Indies. Maybe Old Cadden Heads back in the day, but there just wasn't much of it around. So I never got my head around it. And all the official bottlings I felt were always a wee bit insipid. They weren't giving the whiskey, the malt itself, the space to breathe. I hope that with this new range, there's a step in the right direction, and there is something betraying what the malt can actually be. Let's not get excited here. This is a modern whiskey. There's no doubt about it. There's nothing really kind of old schoolish about this. It's very much bang up to date. But I would say that there's potential here for exploration for enthusiasts. I agree, Roy. This is much more engaging than the 16 Scapa's back, says Alistair Gray. Fantastic. So you've tried them both, Alistair. Doodle the Drama saying German importer said it's not coloured. Fantastic, Arnie. Superb. Put it on the label. It's no hard. Greg is saying blend the two, Roy, just for fun. Now you're talking, Greg. I like the way you think. Chris Pollack is saying when you scan Scapa bottles QR code, it brings up a website that says Farbstoff. Okay, so it does say, so Farbstoff suggests that that's colouring, right? It's usually Zucker colour. Right, is there a QR code on this? Yes. Let's see if I can make that happen. I don't want to do this in front of you. I'll get distracted and open in Chrome. Okay, it's Scapa 10-year-old, 48% alcohol and health, responsible drinking, ingredients, nutrition facts and about us. Let's tap on ingredients. Scotch whisky, malt distillate with water, colour, plain caramel. So I'm right in my assertion. I think that this, for a 10-year-old whisky, is looking a wee bit dark. And I suspect that they have added colour. That's not a good thing. It's my bugbear. Let's add a wee caveat here. We do have caramel. Thanks, Chris. However, if you're not familiar with Scapa and you're willing to go out, if you're not being overcharged, I paid £45 for this, I think. 48 maybe. It might be your first Scapa that you can actually sit and explore and enjoy. Chat has jumped to the bottom. I'm so sorry. Carlos Sanders has bought me 2 drams. He's saying, hey, Roy, as the resident HP expert, cast strength 4 is unchill filtered as per label. They peat only 1/5 of the malt. 21 is a banger. Oh, big guy. You love the stuff. And he's saying also, if there is a dregs of the Mexican whiskey, the Prieto y Prieta I brought to the blind challenge, I'll take them gladly. I love the Orkney vPub. Well, we're not going to stay on Orkney. If there are any dregs, Carlos, they are yours, my friend. I'll absolutely get it back to you. We're going to move off Orkney to 2 other islands momentarily. Brian Cabayas is celebrating being a member for 10 months, saying I'll catch the replay tonight with an island dram. Welcome back, Brian. I hope you're enjoying the replay. How's that island dram going down? Fantastic. Falsgraph is saying, nope, it seems not to be coloured according to the German distributors, 2 of them. Okay, on the official site, it's telling us. This is why I hate the ambiguity here. Mel is saying Aquavitae did a tasting at Scapa 2 years ago and was very surprised at what they have in stock there. Scapa is coming. Mel, it's nice to welcome you here, and it's nice to welcome your optimism for Scapa 2, a distillery that's been off the radar for so many. Dominic Fife is saying, just finished an 8-year-old Scapa in the distillery reserve, 50 cl, 64.5%, peaches and cream, gorgeous, and Chardonnay in colour. That's what we need. Those Chivas Brothers 50 cl distillery, they're fabulous things. We need that, more of that to reach the mass market, don't you think? Is it possible? Is it possible, Dominic? Okay, it's jumped away down. I'll scroll back up to Pedro. He's saying, good evening, Barflies and Aquavitae. I'm late, but finally with you all. Good to see you, Pedro, and amazing to welcome you and Flavio in Glasgow a couple of weeks ago. I am super chuffed that, okay, Highland Park has upgraded its image, but it's not upgraded the liquid. But let's not take anything away. It's kept a solid foundation there, 40%. Scapa, after getting me so excited about the 16-year-old, and then trying it and being like, that 10-year-old is alive. That 10-year-old is a very, very sentient, breathing, visceral thing. And I'm really excited about it. But we need to move off Orkney. Despite the fact that we have the Orkney Distillery, and what's the other one called? Is it Dearness? Yes, Dearness, I think it is. So there are 4 operating distilleries on Orkney now. So I suspect we'll be able to go back to Orkney in the future and maybe have an islands distillery that focuses solely on the developments at Highland Park, Scapa in the future, and obviously 2 new distilleries that are just up and coming there. Exciting times indeed. Maybe we'll roll in Lerwick Distillery up in Shetland as well, and we'll have a distillery to celebrate that's even further north than the Orkney Isles. But now I'm going to bring you south, I'm going to move out west, and we're going to move out to, you might remember me opening a wee bottle from Harris about a year ago now. I don't remember the theme of the vPub. I think it was new whiskies, but not new as in new releases, but brand new things. And Harris, I think, was part of that. I might have made a mistake there. But regardless, about September in 2023, this inaugural one came out. And according to the label on the top here, I have the first release, Batch 3, 2023. If I talk about the level betraying enjoyment, I have to confess to you that I've enjoyed a few drams out of this wee bottle. And there is absolutely nothing in this whiskey that would make you unhappy, except for Batch 3, for me, for this voice in whiskey, a little bit less defined than I expected it to be. There is some peat in this that is lightly peated. It is an island distillery. I mean, it's really quite out there on the west. Harris is a long way out. I expected a bit more, I don't know, a bit more definition. I expected a bit more character, a bit more boldness. This is much softer. Let me have a tiny teaspoon just to remind me. Half a teaspoon. That's a wee bit of salt, a wee bit salty. Don't remember that. Oh, no, it's good. Good texture. Very clean, very pure. Salty, a wee bit salty definitely on the back of those two I've just had. Saltiness is prevalent. Fruity, light. That's about the nicest sip I've had from that. This has been open a year now, so suddenly I've got something that I'm probably going to want to go back and revisit. But I remember my initial impression of this being quite a soft, not fully formed, quite an approachable thing. 46% ABV this was bottled at. They brought out lots and lots of batches at the same time. There was plenty of this around. It was a wee bit pricey, but it was the inaugural, but they were cheeky. There was millions of it. I mean, hopefully they did well out of it. People seem to lap it up and like it. I still use to this day the wee coaster that came with it. It's lasting quite well. But you can see from the level I've not been keen to go back again. Maybe that's changed tonight with that wee half teaspoon. But what I want to do is talk about the fact that Isle of Harris waited a while until their whiskey was a bit more mature. And when you think about it, that might have, people like me that sit and go, oh, this. If they've waited for it to become a bit more integrated, a bit more settled, a bit more mature, that should not be a negative. The fact that that can be that well behaved and that measured at that age is something to be celebrated. Anyway, coincidentally, I can see from the cutout on the top of this, I say box, this is not a box. This is actually a flat piece of cardboard, and it locks just with a kind of, what's it called? A friction fit or something, I can't remember. Anyway, it's just a piece of cardboard cut out and it just fits in. It's not magnetic or anything. But when you take the bottle out of this, it just collapses. It's a flat piece of cardboard, the same as the original inaugural batches, which is great. It's all very inventive, very unique and things like that, but it always makes me a wee bit nervous. It means that there's plenty real estate to print lots of information on. but they also put a wee leaflet inside the packaging too. So it's actually quite nice, all things considered. No coaster this time around. But you know me, this is just going to go in the recycling. I'll maybe have a wee read at it first before it's thrown away, and then it's all about the liquid. Now, excuse my sniffing. Let me mute the mic. Hopefully that mute worked and you didn't have to suffer that. Okay, look at the colour of this bottle and look at the colour of this. That's beautiful. Natural colour. This is what we want. Much more bourbon cask leaning. And this new batch from 2024 is all about the Oloroso casks. Now, let me hold up this 10-year-old Scapa that I mentioned to you earlier. Can you see that the Scapa is every bit of as dark? And arguably, to my eye, the Scapa is actually a wee bit darker, which further leads me to think that there may be colour added to the Scapa. But we need to remember the Scapa is 10 years old, whereas the Harris, the Hirak, is more likely to be in the order of 5 years old. First fill Oloroso Sherry, same as the inaugural, 46% ABV. Like I say, for the completists out there, I have batch 3 2024, which just randomly was the one that was sent to me. So we're now in sherry cask territory in the islands. No glug, far too wide, round bottle. This is a stealth pour from this one, same as the other. Neck pour, first impressions only. Before COVID, before they had any whiskey available, of course they were selling Harris Gin, they were experiencing footfall of 90,000 to 100,000 visitors a year, putting them in the top 10 of distilleries visited in Scotland. They've not recovered to that yet. Post-COVID, it's smaller, but they are still one of the most visited distilleries. I've not been there yet. It's quite incredible numbers. And I suspect it's to do with the fact that they are on a small island. And when you're on a small island, what you're going to do, you're going to go to this place, that place. Suddenly there's a distillery. It's going to be a big attraction, a big pool. Most of the visitors to Harris will end up taking a distillery tour, which is a very positive thing when you think about it. Oh. I'm going to say this in a complimentary way, but so I don't want this to come across negative. Not as Oloroso forward as you might imagine. First fill Oloroso 5 or 6 years old, we think. Let's let this sit for just a wee second. Chris Pollack is saying recycling review upcoming. You know, I really need to do a recycled review because the bottles, the empty bottles that are under my feet are crazy, Chris. Yeah, it's the age-old thing, isn't it? I'm afraid. I'm mindful of it, buddy. Rob Smith is saying, I'm more impressed with the Hirak than the packaging. So you prefer the whiskey over the packaging. That's the way it should be, Rob, though, right? Graham Fraser is saying 5 Orkney distilleries, Roy. Also Kimbland. Graham, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here. So bear in mind that should there be any questions in the quiz at the end tonight around the 5 Orkney distilleries or island distilleries or the island count of distilleries, Kimbland is not included. Thanks for being here and thanks for keeping us up to date, buddy. Charlie McLean apparently says Greg's Whiskey in Paris wanted a perfect balance, and I agree, maybe too much balance, but still beautiful in my opinion. Aquavite, by the way, was a bit disappointed of MDW Maison du Whiskey. Is that exclusive single cask? Too sharp, waiting for an SB. An SB? single barrel. And he's saying, yep, one I voted for in the Oz was and disappointed to see it was only present in the People's Choice Aquavitae. I love my batch 5, one of the best of 2023 single malts for me. So there you've got a big fan of the Harris Distillery and Greg, disappointed to see it only getting a mention in the People's Choice, but that's exactly what the People's Choice is for. There's also the tweed industry there, absolutely, Hoyt. Harris Tweed, famously so. And Arnie is saying, thank you for another wonderful evening with everyone. Replay will commence as soon as I'm at work tomorrow because the islands are still 100% unlocked on my whiskey map. It's exciting. Hey, Arnie, welcome back on the replay, fella. Cheers. And Jimmy Like is saying, ever had a proper barbecue beef rib? Aquavita, you're unknowingly giving me a sample of one. Yes, I have. And well, I don't know if you would call it a proper one, but in Texas, I had some amazing barbecue. Perhaps you could do a Christmas-themed recycled review dressed as Santa Claus. Lander, I don't fancy that. I don't fancy it. I'll use my excuses that it won't age as well. We try to make evergreen content. I just don't want to dress as Santa, buddy. I do need to do a recycled review. And Dominic Fife is saying, Herak batch 15 in my glass gets smokier and richer as the level goes down. Have patience. I will take some of my own dogma and advice, Dominic. Good man. Brian Cabayas is saying, he's celebrating being a member for 10 months. He said, I'll catch the replay tonight with an island dram. Thank you, Brian. Thank you for joining in. And thank you for picking us up on the replay, buddy. I hope you're enjoying your island dram. And Jimmy Lang is saying, how does a man like me get a sample of 20-year-old Lagavulin at 54% by knowing a guy like you, Roy? Trying it now. Thanks so much. Jimmy, did I give you 20-year-old Lagavulin? Did I really? Did I even own 20-year-old Lagavulin? Hey, Jimmy, I'm glad you're enjoying it, buddy. And it works as an island dram, right? Thank you very much for the far too generous dram in return. Cheers to that, Lagavulin. Cheers. Let's think about this. Let's be mindful. Goodness me. Okay. The most obvious statement that this has just made to me, I've just sipped a 12-year-old Highland Park, then a 10-year-old Scapa, and I'm sipping something that's in a rough order about half the age of those. It is younger, demonstrably younger, but it is not half the age younger. Incredibly integrated together, lovely little neat whiskey. First impression. You know, they all are also things that we're looking for are there, but this isn't all cask. It's not about Oloroso sherry cask. If you're looking for a big sherry bomb, this is much more measured than that. There's even a wee bit of nuttiness here. There's a nice bit of kind of caramelized, baked, caramelized, almost maybe like a creme brulee type aspect. I'm kind of stretched a wee bit. Let's go with brown sugar. Let's go with brown sugar. There's a bit of dates and fudge. The nuttiness is prevalent. It's almost like a powdery nut, like a walnut. And a nice balanced richness. But all through all of that, you've got this kind of curtain of, and it's not new make, but it's malty. It's a crisp cereal, dusty, nutty maltiness. Like a Horlicks. If anybody knows what Horlicks is, I'm probably just talking to the Brits now. It's a kind of malted milk drink. Sherry cask is on the palate a wee bit too, but it comes across as a kind of raisins, currants, dried fruit. but all very, it's not extreme, it doesn't shout, it's quite restrained. There's remarkable maturity to the approach here, and there's a remarkable poise and maturity to the whiskey, given how young it is. Now, we need to talk about price here. We're not paying the inaugural prices when everyone was going crazy for it. So despite the fact that, so that the original one is now no longer an inaugural, we're up in the double figures and batches now, and the price is attenuated a little bit. I've seen Harris popping up regularly for £55, £58. It's getting closer to where I think it needs to be a regular contender. And hopefully the price stabilizes and stays as the whiskey becomes a wee bit more mature. I don't know if that's the plan. The whiskey in the Oloroso cask, it's a wee bit more expensive. And I was £65 for this one. But that's still less than I paid for the inaugural. And this is fully matured and first fill Oloroso. So the prices are becoming a little bit more within reach. 65 is still £5 or £10 too rich, I think, honestly. But I felt like I was taking a hit on this. I felt like this was a whiskey I would have to buy for the vPub, for sharing with you guys to talk about island whiskies and this topic. But I'm actually there's a theme building. There's optimism with this. It's a much more confident, together, poised whiskey than I expected it to be. Wow. Is it an island whiskey? I think there is nothing in this glass that would draw me towards my own internal impression of what a Scottish island malt is. So you could argue that it's helping to redefine what I believe island malt whiskey should be from Scotland. Tonight, in my diminished state, non-optimal, I'm not optimal at the best of times, let's be honest. But while I'm congested like this, I'm not getting any peat smoke, any kind of savoury smokiness whatsoever. It may be there. Give me time, give the whiskey time, it may appear. Your mileage will vary. Good wee dram. Greg's Whiskey Guide and Pat, he's absolutely spot on. He's saying, wait for it to open up, Roy. And Hoyt is saying, we have Ovaltine, but I prefer Horlicks. Okay, so Ovaltine, Horlicks, quite similar things. Bedtime drinks, typically, they were marketed as. Every sherry single malt, as says Greg, doesn't have to be necessarily a sherry monster, methinks. And some recent whiskies totally demonstrate that, hence this or the Torrevik Knocknamoynia. So the Torrevik, I would suggest, yeah, I think you're spot on with your point. Yeah, you're right. But the Torrevik was more obviously sherried than this one. In fact, this is at the point that depending on what you put this in a blind flight with, you would need somebody to be on point to pick up the sherried nature of this. And he's saying that Graham Fraser is living in a library indeed. Mike Molasses is saying, I've got both of these in front of me now. The original is a very easy drinker, but I prefer the Oloroso. So Mike is maybe preferring the kind of more overt kind of richness to it. I wonder how I would feel sipping them back and forth. Bruce Bernard is saying, I'm waiting for Dad's Harris tweed, my dad's Harris tweed jacket. Yeah, a lot of Harris tweed got waistcoats, caps, trousers even. I hope It's a bra jacket when it arrives. Sorry, I picked that one up about the Ovaltine, I wonder, I don't know if brands are international, sometimes Horlicks and Ovaltine, that kind of thing. But it used to be, it was a powder that you mixed, and yeah. It used to be a bedtime thing, marketed as a bedtime thing. So there we go. We've visited two. Actually, there's more than two islands because there's a bunch of islands. But the Orkney Isles is a collection, obviously. Harris is an individual island. We move to another individual island to finish up. In the future, I'm going to explore more islands in this series. There's lots to talk about, right? There's lots of complexity. There's lots of developments happening, lots of new distilleries with more mature products, new things coming to market, and the legacy distilleries switching and upping their game and changing things. I mean, we could spend an entire vPub just talking about Highland Park, just talking about Talisker, just talking about Arran, Raasay, right? Talking about individual distilleries. But it's exploring that notion of whiskey that's made in the modern context despite itself. I mean, Scapa and Orkney, Highland Park, the logistics involved there, building a new distillery in Harris or Benbecula, or in a place that you need to travel to an island to, and then travel to another island to. You cannot travel directly to. I'm talking, of course, about Raasay. Wow, it's kind of, there's remoteness, and then there's even more remoteness, right? You travel to Scotland to visit a distillery, and then you say, oh, I'm going to go to an island. So you travel to Skye. Now there's a bridge there. They've put a bridge in place so you don't need to you can still take a ferry if you want to, seasonal ferry, right enough. But there's a bridge to get to Skye. So maybe it's lost that sense of traveling to an island to an extent. But you are very much remote when you're on Skye, and the moodiness of Skye and the landscape and things, it will remind you that you are remote. And then while you're there, you can take the Sconser ferry, a very short, easy ferry ride across to the island of Raasay, which has become, in no small part because of the distillery itself, one of the most amazing tourist destinations on the west coast of Scotland. You need to go and visit. You just need to go, sit at the bar there, look out the window. If it's a dry day, every day I've been at Raasay, it's been a gloriously blue sky day, crazy stuff. Just the view is emotional to behold. I suspect even if it's rainy and moody and windswept and things, it would still be similar. Go to Raasay, make the effort, get to the ferry port early enough so that you can go back and forth on the same day, or be clever and canny about it and book some accommodation. It's won awards for a very, very good reason. This is the R01. I've had this for a long time now. This has been in the collection for a while. I'm halfway through it. This was the inaugural, or one of the earliest releases, I think, from Raasay. This is probably one of the most amazing things I've ever had from Raasay. This is the Nottingham Whisky Association's independent bottling of, well, it's an official independent bottling. Founders Bottling, #1, Fraser Bell, James Burgoyne, Richard Hall, Tom Lindsay, Simon Ray, Billy Saunders. Amazing, the names that are on there. NWA guys, a club that was founded in this very community. This is bottle 41, but up here in my shelf is bottle 1. I bought this one and they gifted me bottle 1. Incredible stuff. So there was lots of places I could have gone, because Raasay has been out long enough now to have multiple, and may I say sometimes for the layman, a little bit confusing range. And lots to choose from, lots to pick. Duncana would have been their take on a sherry cask release, for example. They lean heavily on cask messaging right now, and that makes a lot of sense because they're a young distillery selling young whiskey. Nasia, they talk about a lot of the label real estate is given over to talking about the cask influence. And what I'm excited about for Raasay is to talk and focus more on what they're doing with the spirit before it gets into the wood. I think there's more to talk about that in the future. Anyway, what I decided to go for, and I haven't spent any time studying this or understanding what it is, this has just arrived in the vPub. I have decided to go for their cask strength in the hope that it might banish some of this, this stuffiness in my head. This is a very fashionable thing to do, whether you're an island distillery or not, to bring out an official core range and then to augment it, to fortify it a little bit with something for maybe the more kind of avid enthusiast, the more kind of seasoned whiskey drinker. I don't know how you would describe somebody who's much more interested in a cask strength expression. This one here is part of an 8,400 bottle outturn. It's quite big. It's quite a decent size of outturn, but not massive given this is probably global. 61.3% ABV. It's still quite young whiskey, so it hold on to its ABV very well there. We've got rye cask involved here. Peated and unpeated rye cask, Chinkapin oak, peated and unpeated, and Bordeaux red wine cask. So this is part of this is their Nicaea 6 cask makeup here, putting together what I would expect is going to be their core range, but at cask strength. Natural colour, non-chill filtered, everything that we like to see. Water from our well flows across volcanic rock and filters through Jurassic sandstone, adding minerals crucial to flavour development. Sounds like marketing blurb, but that's actually legitimate information and very, very true. They draw their water directly from under the distillery through a borehole. Every drop of spirit is distilled, matured, and bottled on the Isle of Raasay. Scottish barley malted with Highland peat. Listen, this is a big wraparound label with lots of information on it, but nothing superfluous, nothing flowery, nothing nonsensical, just matter-of-fact language, exactly the way it should be. Scottish malt whisky. I've saved this till last because obviously I started at 40% ABV, moved to the mid-40s, 46, 48% ABV for the Herak and the Scapa. But this one is way above the 60s. This is my bedtime dram. This is my medicinal thing. Now, still got some plastic on here to deal with. Let's get rid of this first. Nope. Quiet pop. Let's get a glug out of this. Which way to pour it to get a glug? Come on. No glug. It's also a modern thing. Oh, well, there's nothing better than a bottle that's a tall round and it gives you that satisfying glug, right? Maybe if I'd poured it in a different direction, I'd have got a glug. Anyway, let's have a wee nose of this before we finish up and move into our quiz at the end. On Sunday night, I hung out with patrons. It was a wonderful wee night, a really relaxed thing. I let them see some behind-the-scenes projects that's going on that seemed to get some of them quite excited. I shared with them some of my anxiety and deliberation about these projects and some of the problems that they potentially bring, but it was great to hang out with them all on Sunday night. On Sunday night, lock-ins with patrons, I try to do them monthly. I often fail. They don't have a theme. Tonight is a theme, Island Whiskies. But the vPub quiz at the end always has a theme for my patrons. And it was pretty tough. It was hard and challenging, but being the knowledgeable folk that they are, some of them still managed a 10 out of 10. Tonight, we have a theme on the vPub. And for a wee change, that theme carries in to the quiz at the end. Just to see how you like it. to see how you get along with it. So throughout tonight, I've been dropping little nuggets of information that may or may not help you with the quiz at the end. I suspect that so many of you don't actually need it, but I'm really hopeful that some of you are going to manage a wee 10 out of 10 on the quiz at the end tonight. Easy questions in there, tricky questions too, banana skins potentially, ass hats definitely. Let's put our nose in this Raasay before we get to that quiz. Okay, ABV, power, potent, strength immediately. Let's go on a wee bit more cautiously this time. Moist tobacco. Oak, lots of active oak things happening here. Some pepper, lots of black pepper. It's quite a wood forward. I mean, it's amazing that despite the fact I'm quite congested, and I have been all evening, of course, you've just got this big piercing heat. Chili, cinnamon, warm, hot spice, some oak wood polish, wax, melted wax. So much cinnamon. Dark. This is a spicy, loud, boisterous, alive. This is not something that you're going to, nothing, all of the whiskies that we've shared tonight, you could put in front of people who are quite happy to explore. And if they're used to drinking neat spirits, everything that we've tabled so far is perfect. This one you need to be a wee bit cautious with, I suspect. And it's not just about the ABV, it's about the boldness of flavour here. It's really quite expressive, and I suspect it's quite expressive through the cask. There's a sweet wood note to things. I think I might have mentioned polish, but let's move towards a wee bit more sanded wood, cedarwood, wood shop type. Wow. Let's search for a bit of fruit. Apple, toasted apple, baked apple, cooked apple. Sweet, but also a bit of sharp. Pepper, lots of pepper. The citrus is less fresh and bright and lemon, and much more kind of orangey, dark, crystallized, candied orange peel, that type of note. Okay. Despite the fact I'm quite congested, this has made it very, very clear to me that I'm going to need to be aware. This is not the type of thing that you take to the TV and sit and watch a box set or something. This is going to interrupt your conversation. This is going to interrupt your concentration. It's obvious. Oofed. There's lots of charm here, lots of charisma, lots of, this is just, wow, this is like so loud. This is young, sharp, loud, shouty, but just wave and wave and wave of flavour. It's not a wave, it's like a step. It's big chunks of, it's almost like, it's really, really intense. So there's lots of that sweet malty new make here too. There's a lot of youth here, but a lot of spice, and it's so very, the development of when it arrives, a whiskey, when it arrives, it kind of does this, but this is like, it's very, very, this is going to need water. This is going to need, and coincidentally, I'm actually using a Raasay water dropper, but I suspect that the size and scale of this water dropper is maybe not up to the task. This is going to be putting in like 0.5 milliliter at a time, when I feel like I should be Ralphieing this. I should be teaspooning this one. This is one of those whiskies that you're going to have fun trying to tame. I don't want that to sound rude or negative. This is very deliberate. So a couple of wee scooshes in there. So you round off those steps quite a bit. Cinnamon is prevalent. Some new make still. Grain and malt. Grist. Mash house. Bright green orchard. Cinnamon, pepper. What's interesting about this is that Raasay have brought us a cask strength version, if I understand well, of their standard core range. That's not typical. Usually you see Bunnahabhain cask strength, you see a different makeup. Ardmurchan cask strength, you see a different makeup from their core range. So to take their core range, I believe, and to make an amped up cask strength version of it, I think is quite interesting. To make it affordable, £65 paid, your mileage may vary, of course, is fantastic. Is it needed when there's so many Raasays currently available? I'll leave that for you to discuss. But I would have to say this is probably the most Raasay that exists in glass right now. I should say Raasay. The closer you are to the distillery, they say Raasay. The S becomes almost like a Z, Raasay. So despite how much of the story here is cask, this spirit is so bold. You're still tasting the spirit. Sometimes we forget that when Ian Buxton wrote his book Whiskies Galore about the Scottish island whisky producers, Raasay was a building site. 2017. In fact, if we look at the Malt Whisky Yearbook, it feels like they've been around for a long time, but they have not. So many things have happened in recent years. '21, I think the first Raasay came out. 2017 founded, yes. First fill, yep, appeared in 2021. So we are only 3 years into this distillery. The best way to enjoy this whiskey is how I started this vPub, and it's how I started to introduce this specific spot, this specific location. There's no way you can just arrive on Raasay. You have to arrive or be here in Scotland. You have to take the very, very significant trip to Skye. If you're going to drive, please don't look at Google Maps and allow that amount of time. Double it. You're going to want to stop at so many places along the way. When you arrive on Skye, you're already off the mainland. You've travelled to an island. To get to Raasay, you then need to take a ferry to a second island. Leave your car on Skye. Leave it. Take the ferry as a foot passenger. You don't need your car when you're on Raasay. Walk up to the distillery. Behold the scale of coming off at sea level and looking up the slope to the distillery and up the slopes to Duncannon and up above the distillery. Enjoy being ensconced in the wonderful hospitality there. Everything that you need is there. A bar with fantastic beer and cocktails and all the malts that you want. The food, it's all there. Book a room. If you're lucky, you'll get a room that overlooks the view. There will be a bottle of Raasay single malt in that room for you. There will be a Glencairn, and it might just be one of these Glencairns that I might have pilfered from that very room, an Isle of Raasay Glencairn. Put your feet up on that windowsill and sit back with this or any of them and just marvel at the fact that these places exist. Ridiculously belligerent, stubborn malt whiskey production places that nobody with any sense would build a business on the back of, other than to make whiskey with a sense of place, to borrow Dave Brim's book title. It's amazing. You will feel remote. Your heartbeat will be slower than it's ever been. Your anxiety will be lower than it's ever been. And you will understand that all whiskey has its place. It's a nice place to go. And it's much more soothing than the cask strength version of the whiskey that it makes as well. Fantastic. I suspect that there is a lot of exploration to be done, of future visits to the islands. We've not touched Arran. We've not touched Jura. We've not touched Mull, Tobermory, Lerwick, and Tobermory malt. We're excluding Islay from this. It's its own region in its own right. I think that there is a real island renaissance. In the space of 15 years, we've gone from 6 distilleries to 16, or as Graham pointed out tonight with Kimbland, 17, potentially more. It's incredible. That's the reason that this has been part 1. Do island distilleries have their own identity? Do they have their own characteristic? Do they have a central kind of core style? I think the jury's out, honestly. I think when they're all making peated and unpeated, and potentially most of them somewhere in between, slightly peated kind of flavors take on malt, I think they've all got the ability to be lots of things. my takeaway from tonight is that exploring it is rather fantastic. Kyle Taylor is saying, pouring my 15-year-old Talisker in honour of your article last week. Cheers to my good friend Wally. 15-year-old Talisker. Did Wally review a Talisker recently? I enjoyed my Whisky Week on Skye and Raasay this summer, despite the rain, says Graham Fraser. That's unfortunate. I've just been very, very lucky. Gone out to Raasay, it's always been the most amazing, highly saturated sunshine and blue sky. And that was despite the fact I went in summer or late summer, and then the first time I went there was early spring. Torravik have not produced anything bad. I have tried, says Alan Smith. I've not even touched, Skye. Torravik is just, I've got most of what their releases. And I have to say, Alan, I'm enjoying what they're bringing out too. Rick Johnson is saying, Graham, you should go with Roy. Apparently, it's always sunny when he goes. Gordon Fraser saying it's never rains on Skye. He's a big fat hairy liar. Don't believe him. And Peter Lee saying, late to the party, been busy at work. What have I missed? Peter, nothing. You have missed nothing, my friend, that you can't pick up on replay. Conrad is here. Blackfenny saying, I was forgetting Ardnamurchan isn't an island distillery. I visited by catching a ferry from Tobermory and saw dolphins. Fantastic. Dolphins. That'd be amazing to see. Conrad, but it's also understandable, that mistake, because the style of Ardnamurchan is very West Coast and very coastally, islandy in style. I would definitely say. Okay, who's up for a wee quiz at the end? Cesare is saying Raasay cast strength all the time for £65. Fantastic. Cesare is a fan and he's enjoying it. Good to hear. Good to see you still in at this point in time, despite the fact you're an hour ahead of us in Poland. Listen, for everyone that wants to drop out for the quiz at the end, it is, I hope, a decent one tonight. Hope it's a fun one. I hope it's something that you can enjoy, and I hope it's something that everyone has a chance of getting a 10 out of 10. There's always going to be a wee banana skin. There's always going to be an asshat, something that you need to know the answer to 2 different things to get the question right, but it's always within the reach of knowledgeable whisky folk. Jimmy Legg is saying, Roy, you're sounding better. Whisky is fixing you. A proper thing. And Graham Fraser is saying, time for an islands region, Roy. I've always kind of mentally categorized it as a separate region anyway, a 6th whisky region. Whether or not it needs that definition anymore, probably not. We can decide ourselves rather than the SWA deciding. The islands is very much our region. And Lowlander is saying, I've got an early start tomorrow, so I have to skip the quiz. Thanks for another great vPub, Lowlander. If you do drop in and pick up the quiz on the replay, leave your scores in the comments if you feel like it. It's always optional. It's always up to the individual, of course. Let's see, did I get the quiz? I think I did. Let's bring this in. Let's remind everyone that the quiz at the end is always multiple choice. Everyone has a chance of doing quite well at the quiz at the end. The pass mark is only ever 5 out of 10. If you see a banana skin, I don't think there are any in here tonight. That suggests that you might need to pause and reread the question or think twice about it. If you see an asshat, it means that you probably have been presented with something that is deliberately obtuse. You probably need to know the answer to 2 different things to get right. Good luck, everyone. You only share the scores if you want to. It's just meant as fun, to pique your curiosity, and maybe, if we've been really lucky, for you to take away a wee nugget of new knowledge. 5, says Gordon Fraser, if only. Jean Kelly is saying, strap in for a humbling experience. I tell you what a humbling experience is, Jean. Me getting to hang out with you and your pals for a wee bit in Glasgow recently. Brilliant stuff. And there's my big pal Gerben in the Netherlands saying, let's go with the quiz. A very rare appearance for me to be quizzing along. It's wonderful to have you, big guy. Let's roll right into question 1. Good luck, everyone. Which of these statements is true about Highland Park's famous rogue, Magnus Jonsson? What's true about the famous Magnus Jonsson of Highland Park? A, he was a butcher. B, he was an illicit distiller and a smuggler? Or C, he was a preacher and a church officer? Which of those statements is true about the charismatic, I never met him, Magnus Jönsson? Sean is saying it's a long day, so a pass would be a dream at this point. Hold on in there, Sean. Graham Fraser saying I'm about to do the quiz, walking home in -1 degrees to -1 temperatures. Listen, I want to say to all of you out there in continental Europe or North Canada, whatever, -1 looks like nothing. But I have to say, -1 in Scotland with its humidity, its breeze, its -1 is, and also the way that we probably dress. -1 is pretty tricky. Graham, I hope you're warm and well. James in Sweden is reminding us it's -10 over there. And Ian Williamson is saying B because everyone else is saying B. Let's see what the gentleman, Graham Fraser, is saying. He tends to hold off until the end, I think. He holds his water. It's not because he's following the crowd. I think it's because people maybe have worked out that it's a good ploy to follow Graham Fraser. He's saying B and C. I can tell you that Magnus Jönsson was a preacher and a church officer. He was also an illicit distiller and a smuggler. He was also at the helm of Highland Park Distillery once upon a time, and he was also a butcher. He was all three. So nobody is getting a donut tonight. Nobody's going home with nothing. Quiz at the end, everyone's getting a point. Question 2. Which of these was not an official release from Highland Park? So I'm going to give you 3 Highland Park releases, so to speak. I need you to spot the one that's fake. A, Wings of the Eagle. B, March of the Stag. C, Loyalty of the Wolf. Nonsense, nonsense, nonsense. Absolute, utter nonsense, but that's just my opinion. Regardless, 2 of those are legitimate releases from Highland Park. I would like you to spot the one that is false. A, Highland Park Wings of the Eagle. B, Highland Park March of the Stag. C, Highland Park Loyalty of the Wolf. Warner, One Glassman is suggesting B, no stag. Lachlan McKenzie, good to see you. Also suggesting B. Greg is saying, but C is so ridiculous, to be honest. Stag's March in the UK, says Chris. And Ian Williamson is saying B, surely. Wolves are loyal, questions Jimmy Legg. Absolutely, Ian. B, March of the Stag is completely made up by me, but as part of the old kind of Viking branding that they had. Loyalty of the Wolf was very much a release, as well as Wings of the Eagle. March of the Stag I made up. Question 3. Which of the following statements is true of Scapa Distillery? Scapa, we're staying on Orkney for this one, but we're talking about Scapa, which is true. A, it contracted a team from Highland Park to keep the plant running in the 1990s. B, it uses a wash still, which was once a Lomond still. Or C, it is unique in Scotland in that its spirit still is a Lomond still. So we're looking for something that's unique. Sorry, we're looking for something that's true about Scapa. It contracted a team from Highland Park to keep it running in the 1990s. Its wash still was once a Lomond still, or its spirit still is a Lomond still, making it unique. So knowledgeable. Chris is saying wolves are insanely loyal to the pack. And Ian Williamson is saying A all the way. And Rick Johnson is saying A, because barflies are often smarter than me. A. Peahead is saying C might be, but not unique. Well, I can tell you that Scapa does indeed have a Lomond still. However, it is not its spirit still, which you would typically expect it to be. It is actually its wash still with the Lomond still plates removed. So the Lomond still part of it is incidental. It's not used as a Lomond still anymore. The plates in the neck are long gone. It's just a wide cylindrical fat-necked wash still. So A, it contracted a team from Highland Park to keep the plant running in the 1990s. That's absolutely true. And it also uses a wash still that was once a Lomond still. So A and B. Hopefully keeping it nice and easy so that lots of you are on 3 out of 3 so far. Good luck as we roll into question 4. The original 14-year-old Scapa official release had what in common with the 16-year-old official release and the much more recent no-age statement Skieran and Glansa bottlings, all of which are now retired. So we're looking for commonality amongst all of the official 21st century Scapa releases. A, that was a lighthouse featured on the branding. B, they were all 40% ABV, both domestic and export. Or C, they all featured an Orkney yawl fishing boat. All of the 21st century branding of official Scapa, up until the most recent rebrand, that is, it was a 14-year-old, then a 16-year-old, then the Skieran and Glansa, and they all had in common either a lighthouse, 40% ABV, or a boat. Mike Molasses is saying, I want it to be C. I did give away a wee nugget earlier in the chat tonight. Greg is saying B, but thought it was A, B, and C. Grain of Malt is saying B and C. I can tell you that there is only one correct answer here. There is only one. So, James, please pick between them. Greg is saying, okay, no, there's B and C. Whiskey with Molly is saying C. Nope. Nothing to do with illustrations. Nothing to do with branding, so to speak. It is, in fact, the fact that they were all 40% ABV. I did mention this earlier. The 14 is 16, 40% Glansa, and Skieran 40%. Lighthouse branding was on the original 14%. The Orkney yawl fishing boat came along in the 16-year-old, and they kept that for Skieran. They kept it for Glansa, and they've kept it for this new one. Hopefully you'll see it best. It's really quite pretty. And I'll try and bring this up so you can see the yawl here. So it's a sailboat, fishing boat. And the yawl, I believe, and I know nothing about boats, believe me, in case that's not apparently obvious, is apparently very specific to Orkney. So B is the right answer in that one. I suspect I might have lost a few of you there as we roll into the picture question. AI has been involved tonight, and AI has obliterated this distillery. It has removed the distillery from this pretty picture. What distillery has been removed? A, Isle of Raasay Distillery. B, Dearness Distillery. Or C, Isle of Harris Distillery. What distillery has been removed by AI from this image? Kieran is saying 4 out of 4. The yawl was exhibited by Scapa at a whisky fair. Also in Netherlands, also for sailing, teaching purposes. Wow. So Yule is not exclusive to Orkney. Okay. Isle of Raasay has been removed. Dearness has been removed, or Isle of Harris has been removed. You're pretty knowledgeable folk. I think my drama of tonight has been that Scapa, you know that? Anyway, you're all absolutely spot on. Where's Roy saying C in Bruce, Hoyt, Hemphill, Peter Box, Alan Smith, Sugar Kitty, everyone thinking it's Isle of Harris. Absolutely spot on. It is indeed Isle of Harris Distillery that AI removed there. So if you said C, you've got it right as we roll into question 6. Which of these activities has Isle of Raasay Distillery to date only experimented with? I'm going to give you 3 things here, and you need to identify what they have experimented with only. A, they've experimented with reducing their liquid on the island with local water. When I say reducing, I'm talking about reducing for filling the casks as well as reducing for filling the bottles. B, they've experimented with malting and drying their peated barley on the island. Or C, they have experimented with growing their own local barley on the island. Blackfen is celebrating a pass mark with 5 out of 5. Good for you, Conrad. Graham Fraser also on 5 out of 5. Peter Box, Jean Kelly, passing score secured. 5 out of 5 for Kyle Taylor. Nicholas on a 5 out of 5 is in Rick Johnson as well. Where's Roy O'Vermeer, Kervin Blocker, Ted Brooks? Lots of 5s. Daisy, good to see you, Daisy. And Sharmila Suze, Sharmila. I think that might be a new name, Sharmila. Nice to welcome you in. Bruce Bernard, Ian Bruce, Rob Smith, Greg's Whiskey Guide, Andy Pears, Hellswood. Lots of 5s. Cesare, Jerry Miller, One Glassman Warner, Peathead. Hey, we're in good shape for lots of you. So many of you participating. Thank you so much for hanging out with me till the bitter end. Vasil is in saying C. Whiskey with Molly Ben is saying C, along with Rick Johnson, Ian Bruce, Jerry Mill, Chris Pollack, and Greg in Paris, all saying C. You're absolutely spot on. They do not experiment with reduction of their liquid on the island. They do that uniformly. Malting and drying, no, that's contracted. But C, growing their own barley, they have absolutely experimented with. Very small scale, very difficult to pull off, very difficult to make it cost effective or efficient. Question 7. A gentleman by the name of Simon Erlanger is one of the directors of Isle of Harris Distillers. But what was his previous whiskey employment? Where is Simon Erlanger famously from? A. He was marketing for Glenmorangie plc. B. He was the business development guy for Hague. Or C. He was the master distiller for Angus Dundee. Greg's Whiskey Guide is confessing that it's thanks to the crowd. It's okay. The quiz at the end is very much about the vPub. It's very much about community. If you lean on each other and if you help each other and you end up with scoring better than you otherwise would have, that exactly is what it's all about. Lots of 6s, Cesare, Greg's Whiskey Guide, Chris Pollack, Peathead, Ian Bruce, Rob Smith, Ted Brooks, Daisy, Kyle Taylor, Hellswood, Sharmila, John Ginger Genius has slipped up along with Gordon Fraser, but they've both still got a pass mark on a 5 out of 6. Big Ed is on a 6 and Dan is on a 6 out of 6 as well. Nicholas on a 6. Rick Johnson, Kerbin, fantastic stuff, guys. Okay, what was Simon Erlanger before he was over directing business at Harris? Master Distiller for Angus Dundee, no. Robert Fleming is celebrating 5 decades at Angus Dundee right now. I think that's correct, unless I've had a bit of a brain fart there. It feels like I'm second-guessing myself now. Business Development Manager for William Hague. Maybe that exists today, but I don't know of such a thing. Hague is very much less a company and more a brand now. I'm talking about being marketing for Glenmorangie before he was one of the directors and founders over at Harris. If you answered A, move on to question 8. You're doing well. The famous English writer, Dr. Samuel Johnson, once wrote the words, "Little that can detain the traveller, except the laird and his family," in reference to which award-winning Whisky Island and tourism destination. So the late great 18th century writer Samuel Johnson once said of this destination that there is little to do there, little to detain the traveller except the local laird and his family. However, today in 2024, we're now talking about an award-winning Whisky Island and destination, how things have changed. Are we talking about A, Isle of Raasay? Are we talking about B, Isle of Harris? Or are we talking about C, the Orkney Isles? Laird, says Jimmy Legg. Chieftain, question mark. Yeah, laird, chieftain, landowner, aristocracy. Yes. Inherited authority. I don't know how you would want to define such a crazy concept, but it's there. Stay on topic for tonight, says Dan. Got to be Raasay. Well, we've covered Scapa and Orkney. Sorry, Scapa and Highland Park on Orkney, and Isle of Harris as well. Falsgraf, good to see you, Klaus. He's saying, crowd be with me, A. Pedro is saying, no idea, I'm going with A with the barflies. Sure, why not? A, says Rick Johnson. Dave the Brave is in, good to see you, Dave. Going for A. He never made it to Orkney, says Ian Bruce. Ooh, inside intelligence there on Samuel Johnson. Absolutely spot on, can't catch you out. Isle of Raasay, award-winning tourism destination. I'm not just talking about going there to visit the distillery. I'm talking about the whole hospitality package. The thing I was bragging about earlier, I've been able to enjoy it, and it is just an amazing place to go. You need to go there. You need to enjoy a dram with that view across to Skye. It's quite fantastic. Question 9, lots of opportunity here for big scores. 8s, 9s out of 10s, absolutely guaranteed, but maybe some 10 out of 10s as well. What can the Isle of Harris and Isle of Raasay distilleries both claim to share in common? What do they both have in common over Harris and Raasay? A, their stills were made by Frilly in Italy. B, their stills were made by Hoga in Portugal. Or C, their stills were made by Forsyths in Scotland. What do they both have in common? Peter Lee is a hospitality package. Peter Lee is punching way above the hospitality bracket, absolutely. Peter Lee is a VIP, a gentleman, a wonderful, epic barfly, and an incredibly accomplished welcomer of travellers. Him and Denise and his family. Amazing hospitality. Raasay and Harris have in common Italian stills made by Frilly, Portuguese stills made by Hoga, or Scottish stills made at Forsyths. Vasil Glagola is suggesting B, whereas Chris Pollack is saying A. Good to see you, Vasil. Good to see you, Chris. Sharmila is saying A and following the crowd. Very important, Peter. VIP, says Petehead. Absolutely spot on. Mike is saying, I don't know, but I feel pressured to pick A. I wonder which ones are made in Portugal, says Greg's Whiskey Guide. And Jimmy Legg is saying, is Hoga even? Absolutely, Hoga is a thing. Did you make that up, Aquaviti? No, Hoga is a Portuguese still maker. I think Dornoch stills are Hoga, Portuguese stills. But I'm going from memory now, so if that's a brain fart and I made a mistake, I might be wrong. So I've given it away. It's not B, and it is indeed not Scottish either, but Frilly of Italy. We are in a good place for a lot of 10 out of 10s tonight. And I suspect anyone that was listening to the chat earlier. Cesare is on a 9. Big Ed is on a 9. Gene Kelly's on a 9. Let's see who else. Pete Head, Dan, Nicholas, Hellswood, Peter Box, Skerbin, Dave the Brave, Daisy. Oh, it's jumped. No. Falsgraf, Greg's Whiskey Guide, Cool, he's saying. Sharmila, Ted Brooks, Where's Roy in Norway? Fantastic. Chris Pollack. Jimmy Legg, he's excited as well on 9 out of 9. Crunch Time says Ian Bruce. Bruce Bernard on 9. Sugar Kitty on 9. Rick Johnson, Rob Smith, so many of you. Okay, let's roll into there will be an asshat. There is an asshat tonight. Of course there is. But it's a doable asshat if you were paying any attention or listening at all earlier. Okay. Including all of the active distilleries on Islay, including the distilleries on Islay. It's different from the theme tonight. In 2024, where we are today, Scotland boasts how many operational malt distilleries located on its islands? It is about the same number as A, operational distilleries currently owned by Diageo, malt distilleries. B, operational distilleries in England, malt distilleries. C, operational distilleries beginning with Glen. How many island distilleries are there in total? That means all the Highland region, all the Islay region, and also potentially Lag, which could be arguably a lowland. I'm talking about all the distilleries, malt distilleries in Scotland producing on an island. That is the same number as A, operational distilleries owned by Diageo, operational malt distilleries in England, or operational malt distilleries beginning with Glen. Who's going to make it through? Who's going to make it through? Now, I did tell you how many island distilleries there are. You know how many Islay distilleries there are. So by adding the two together, you've got that part of the answer. But you've still got some work to do. You've still got to know how many Diageo distilleries there are, how many distilleries there are in England today, and how many distilleries there are beginning with Glen. How would you know that? By listening to previous vPubs, potentially, reading the Malt Whisky Yearbook, whatever you can draw on. Maybe you're left tonight with drawing on your fellow barflies in the crowd. Pedro is changing from A to C. Graham Malt James is sticking with C, and the Ginger Genius John is saying C. So we've got a leaning with Mark Chapman, Ted Brooks, Big Ed, Gerwin Blocker, and Rick Johnson all moving towards C to join Chris Pollack, Pete Head, Hoyt, Jerry Miller, Vasil, Gordon Fraser. Gordon's still in here at the end. Good to have you hanging out with me, big guy. Pete Head is saying A equals 30 or so, B equals 55, C equals the answer. Pete Head is being very, very, I know he's from the Netherlands, but he's been quite German about the matter-of-factness about things. Whiskey with Molly is saying 26, question mark. Good to have you in right to the end, Ben. I can reveal to you that you're doing quite well. Diageo own 30 operational malt distilleries in Scotland. Distilleries in England currently are numbering in the neighbourhood of 55. Operational malt distilleries in Scotland, beginning with Glen, is 26. And I can tell you that I told you let's say there are 10 operational Islay distilleries, along with 16 island distilleries. So the answer is 26. Anybody that answered C, Pierre is saying, I am read not a German. I did just suggest in a complimentary way. It's quite a Germanic way of thinking. Let's see who managed a 10. Who's celebrating tonight? Fantastic. Kyle Taylor and Mike Molasses just missing out by one. Fantastic score, guys. But Herbin celebrating a 10. Sharmila Sue's dancing, celebrating a 10. Hellswind on a 10, fantastic. Jerry Miller, a 10. Cesare in Poland, a 10. Worst staying up for Cesare, fantastic. Greg's Whiskey Guide, my second 10 out of 10 ever then. Rick Johnson on a 10, fantastic guys. Gene Kelly, Dan DVDW, Dave the Brave slipped up. Oh, Dave, I thought you were going to get there. Graham Malt James, I thought you were going to get there. Daisy as well, 9. Cesare, all the celebrations. Sugar Kitty celebrating a 10. Did I miss anyone? Mark Chapman is saying, well done, all of you 10s. Thank you, Mark. Very gracious of you. Rob Smith celebrating a 10. Sugar Kitty. Peter Box as well. Nicholas, Ian Bruce, Gene Kelly, a 10. Just amazing stuff. Dan is celebrating a 10. Listen, lots and lots and lots of 10s tonight. That's exactly what I hoped could happen. After the quiz has been a wee bit brutal, even on the Sunday night lock-in with patrons. It's a wee bit of a brutal, challenging quiz, but that's where it should be. Every now and again, though, there should be a quiz where you've got the ability to navigate through with the help of your fellow barflies in order to manage and realise a 10 out of 10. It's good fun. Hopefully the questions are still fun too. I almost cancelled tonight. I almost put out a wee recorded video so that you could hear how nasally I was and how choked up I was. Earlier today I was sneezing and coughing and blocked up and things. But whiskey, is there anything it can't do, right? We managed another Thursday night vPub, but not only did we manage it, I find myself happy and enjoying it and glad to have hung out with all of you again for another wee Thursday night. Can I remind everyone that 8:30 tomorrow night, if you find yourself so predisposed and available, jump on to Jeff Whiskey on YouTube. Even if you haven't participated or you haven't voted, even if you haven't tried any English malt whiskey yet, I guarantee you that that is going to be your hard anchor point from henceforth in order to explore it. That's going to be from people who have tried English whiskey, who are enjoying English whiskey, who are loving English whiskey, sharing the best of their knowledge with you in a very condensed, independent, and focused way. I really hope to see you there tomorrow evening from 8:30. The link is in the chat, and I hope that I remember my housekeeping and I put the link in the description box below. If I forget, please remind me. But you just need to search YouTube for Jeff Whiskey and you'll find it. Rick Johnson's bought me a dram to say, we'll miss next week, Roy, is Thanksgiving in the US. So here's a toast for next week, Roy. Thanksgiving is the night I kicked the vPub off on, Rick. It always seems to happen. That must mean, does that mean that's 6 years of the vPub next Thursday night? Yeah. Rick, thank you very much for your dram, my friend. Thanks for dropping in and hanging out with us tonight. And Jimmy's saying, thanks for toughing it out, you bastard. I hardly toughed it out in the end, Jimmy. Whiskey gets us through, right, big guy? And it does it so very, very easily. Ian Bruce is saying, thanks, Roy. Time to get back to work and listen to the latest Dramface podcast. You're going to enjoy it, Ian. I hope you are. Maybe get a bit tired of hearing my voice right enough. Graham Fraser is saying, oh, my phone died at 9 out of 9, so missed question 10. Congrats to the 10 out of 10ers. Oh, Graham, I bet you'd have got it as well. John, the Ginger Genius, is saying, thanks, Roy. Great vPub. Thank you, John. Always brilliant to have you here. Alan Smith is saying, thanks, Roy, for pushing through. Thank you, Alan. Nice to have you here, buddy. Petehead is saying, with that, I call it a day. Going to hit the sack. Thanks for organising. As always, aggravated. Get well soon. See you tomorrow with Jeff Whiskey Sludgevat. All of you. Ian Williams is saying, cheers. Get better soon. Thank you, Ian. Thank you so much. Dan is saying, thanks for hosting another great vPub, Roy. Rob Smith is saying, great fun tonight. Hope you feel better soon, Roy. Graham Malt James is saying, thanks. Whiskey does it again. Absolutely, James. Gene Kelly is saying, not likely to make next week. It's Thanksgiving, but then again, who knows? The spirit may move me. And also remember that the vPub goes out quite early in the day for you guys in the States. Mike Molas is saying, good night and get well soon. Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you all. Pedro in Brazil is saying, good evening, Barflies and Aquaviti. Now I'll finish watching the lock-in, and Herben is saying, Aquaviti, thank you very, very much. Despite my congestion, despite the way I'm feeling and things, I've enjoyed tonight. I'm very glad to have been able to bring the vPub to you despite it. I'm very much looking forward to hanging out with you again next Thursday night and tomorrow for the English Whisky Awards. Until then, I'll raise this wee drip, whatever's left in my glass now, and thank you all for hanging out with me this Thursday night. Remind you all that you're very dearly loved, and to your health. Slán Jura.